I'm Martin Gray, and I've been assigned to brief you on 2004's DC Comics Presents The Atom and Hawkman.
DC Secret Files. DC Secret Files. Deadman and questions and villains so vile. Spectres and manhunters H on the dial. Mysteries, mayhem uncovered in style. Making their way through the pile. One by one we'll go through. DC Secret Files.
For those who don't know their Scottish history, Old Town was essentially buried under the construction of modern-day Edinburgh. 18th century city blocks are still accessible through Mary King's Close, and setting aside the imminent disrespect for archaeological and architectural integrity, I can think of worse spaces in which to hide from jackbooted thugs. Well, hide and go seek. I'm no martial arts master, and my best years for physical confrontations are not only long past, but never highly regarded in the first place. But clapping a foot-long metal cylinder across the back of someone's head when they don't see you coming tends to be appropriate for most ages and levels of expertise. Hey you! It works pretty well from the front too, as I can still cross a short distance at a fair clip. Also, I can flop to my belly and crawl behind a stone corner for cover like a man 3/4 my age. We've got him cornered! Close in! Again, the close is surprisingly expansive for an entombed town, but it does limit your escape options. On the plus side, I had kept my eyes open for emergency exits. On the minus side, I had a half dozen armed men between one and myself. But I did mention that metal cylinder, right? You may recall that I had picked up one of Mark Shaw's old power batons at Shag's secret shack in Florida. I fired its magnetic pulse emitter at the thugs, scattering and disorienting them while I used it to leapfrog over my pursuers. Even reaching the exit, I still had to make my way up about 40 slick stone steps to return to the surface without taking a bullet to my back. My apologies to the Edinburgh Historic Society, but I wasn't taking any chances on my way out. The rumble from the cave-in had spooked passers-by in the area, but I didn't have long to make myself scarce. Luckily, this was not my first trip to Auld Reekie, and Billy Hines wasn't my only friendly in town. Welcome all to DC Secret Files, the definitive podcast of the DC Universe, 1993 through 2011. Continuing the mission of Rob Kelly and the Irredeemable Shag's Who's Who podcast, as well as Ryan Daly's Secret Origins podcast and Don Markstein's Tunapedia, we look at short introductory stories and illustrated biographical pieces from the DC Comics catalog, then discuss their merits. Today's guest has been writing for his blog, Too Dangerous for a Girl, since 2007, coming at it from a place of not only a half-century's fandom, but also from the inside track of 80s UK comics publishing. He's also a veteran guest of such Fire and Water podcast shows as Secret Origins, Film and Water, Midnight, JLI Podcast, FW Presents, Batman Family Reunion, DC Special Cast, FW Team Up, Panel by Panel, Mountain Comics, For All Mankind, Who's Editing, Treasury Cast, JSA in the 90s, and Peacebound and Down. Please welcome Martin Gray!
Wow, thank you, Frank. Honestly, it sounds like you know more about me than I do. Can I thank you for not bringing up my sad times with Polly Pocket comic? Although I am very proud of my years stroking My Little Pony and friends.
I've covered pretty thoroughly at least the Fire and Water podcast networks section of your podcasting exploits, but I didn't really touch too much on the comics side of it. Want to tell folks a little bit about the CVA?
About the what, sorry?
Oh, sorry, the resume.
Oh, right, sorry, yes. See, I started out as a newspaper reporter when I was young, in my early 20s, and inspired by Clark Kent, of course. And then after a few years, I managed to get a job in British comics on the back of having been a regular letter writer. The job was advertised in the fanzines. They knew my name from the letter columns, got an interview, spilled a cup of coffee over the chap interviewing me, Brian Clark, amazing fella. I've spent a few years working for a company called, the big European company, Egmont, and it was the British version, offshoot, London Editions magazines. And we reprinted Batman comics, Superman. We had comics like DC Action Zones, which published things like Swamp Thing and Animal Man, etc. But we also had originated kids comics, and so we had licenses for things like My Little Pony, Polly Pocket Comics, and meant I had to deal with a lot with the licensors and Hasbro. The Polly Pocket people were then, at least, the worst people in the world to deal with. Horrendous. But I did get to write 1 week because they had approval of all the stories. And 1 week they gave us disapproval of a story. They wouldn't approve a story at the last minute or they changed their mind, which meant as the editor, I got to write a story over the weekend. And I did a sequel to My Little Pony video about the Shmoo, which just a bit of fun. And it was just great fun to see it drawn. And years later, I found out that it was apparently a bit of a cult thing with the British My Little Pony comics readers who were at that point preceding the Bronies by a few years. But it turned out they were very excited to see the Shmoo in the comics. And that was good fun. But yeah, I also edited British comics based on such things that probably Americans will never have heard of, like Sooty, who was a television bear. But we did Duckula comics, and we had the license to reprint a lot of the European Disney materials. And eventually we lost that license. It went to IPC in London, who did Judge Dredd and the like. And in order to get the license back, they bought IPC, sacked half the staff in Manchester. The rest of us had to move down to London. And it was such a poisonous atmosphere that after about 6 months, I managed to negotiate my way out. But I did have about 4 or 5 years in British comics, and it was absolutely lovely. A really wonderful, creative, supportive environment. And it was nice that, occasionally you got to talk to people in DC like Mike Carlin and Phyllis, who handled all the international licensing deals and things. And it was just great fun. And then just to go back to being a normal comics reader again, it's great fun. And then a few years later, things came along, the internet came along a bit more, and you could just get involved with other fans over the internet. And since then, in the years since, I've just had an absolute great time getting to know fans from all over the world. I mean, probably the absolute highlight of my career in comics was just writing the letter column, because I really enjoyed the back and forth with the readers, which had absolutely brilliant readers who would write in. I've just been very, very lucky boy, Frank. Very lucky indeed.
Nothing hurts your fandom as much as having to work within the industry that you're a fan of. So it's good when you can get in there, make your mark, and then come back out again. It's also neat because it's not a Zoid situation. I've actually heard of Polly Pocket. I don't know, was it a lot bigger over there than it was here? Because it was kind of a blip here. Did it have a few years in it?
It did have a few years. I mean, I believe it's back again and getting popular again. But at that point, it was the very beginning. I think it was like late 80s, early 90s. And they were just really pushing it. So in the UK market, if you had a comic to help push things, that was pretty good. But again, they were so sort of tightly wound as to what they would let you do and things, because we were helping them create the backstory at that point for Polly Pocket. It was just a real pain. I mean, the toys were quite cute, and again, it was just lovely dealing with the readers, getting little stories and letters and pictures and photos. Absolutely delightful. Yeah, well, I wasn't sad to get away from the Polly Pocket project at all. One of the best things we had was called Werebears. It was a toy, a short-lived toy. It was like cuddly little teddy bears on the inside, and you turned it inside out, and they were like werewolves with fangs, and they were wonderful. And we had a comic about that for a wee short while, but yeah, it was just fun. Yeah, I was lucky because I did work with really great people on the editorial side, the marketing people, great, the advertising people were fun. Most of the people we dealt with were excellent, so it was just a privilege.
Werebears sound pretty cool. I could have seen it into that. You got that little bit of a horror divide there. But also something brought you to the comics in the first place. How did you get into comic books in general?
It was when I was a little kid. We didn't get, I don't think as such, don't ever remember getting the Super Friends on the TV here. But, I think someone I heard was saying on a podcast recently, there's probably never a time when you can't remember knowing Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, probably Spider-Man as well. When I was about 7 or 8, because of things were a lot more relaxed in those days than now. So when 8-year-old kids in those days could, babysit for 3- and 4-year-old kids on an evening, basically other neighbours. Your mother would be like about a street where there's any problems and things. I used to babysit for this lovely lady called Annette Smith, her little kids, and she would give me 50 pence and loads and loads of sweeties, and I'd come home also with a pile of about 50 to 100 comics from her brother, who used to collect DC comics in the early 60s. So this was about 71, 72, maybe about once a week. I'd just come back with hundreds of DC comics, your Superman, Batman, World's Finest, odd Hawkman, Atom and things. Not so much Adam Strange, but Justice League. And it was just dedication. And before long, I also started buying the British ones. So I'd be reading, 1962, 63 Superman at the same time as, seeing Superman overcome his problems with kryptonite for a short while and Diana Prince losing her powers. Not at all difficult to keep things straight. There was no problem with the parallel worlds. Earth's quite understandable. Just kept reading, kept buying, started writing to the fanzines and to the British reprints of Marvel and DC comics and Warrior comic when it came out, originating material. And I've just never shut up since.
That's where the love comes in. You can spend your entire life being excited about something and enjoy talking about it. My gal is always frustrated because she'll have things that she's a fan of for periods of time, and then they wear thin and she has to move on and doesn't have that kind of passion for something. But that'll power you through life if you've got something you can really attach to, like we do with comic books.
Absolutely, and because they're always being renewed in terms of the creators of the comic books, or the revamping the universes, or there's a new product to buy, or a collection will come out of something that you've always been wanting to read, or you had and you've lost, or something, or you need in good condition. There's just always something going on. I just love the churn, and the new. Give me the news. What's happening? I also love the nostalgia. The articles on old comics and things, and just my fellow fans just being able to chat and just enjoy the enthusiasm and share stories. It's just wonderful. It's not going to be something I think either of us are going to grow out of anytime soon, if ever. Never.
I don't see it happening. I've got enough comic books to last me the rest of my days. I would like to get as many of these read as possible.
Definitely. I've got so many comics behind me, so many books, the Sandman Mystery Theater and things I've never read.
So I guess we can move on into the actual books themselves. According to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, DC Comics presents Hawkman #1 was released on July 28th, 2004, before a September cover date. It featured a $2.50 US cover price and was edited by Joey Cavalieri. Cover art was provided by Jose Luis Garcia-Lopez, praise be his name, and Kevin Nolan, wicked be his embellishment. Recreating Murphy Anderson's 1965 cover to Hawkman #6, above a desert, a winged gorilla with a circular object dangling from a strap across its chest is pouncing on the winged wonder. Its paw seizing the straps holding Katar Hall's wing rig. Hawkman is falling backward in midair, kicking at the ape, his chainmail swinging behind him. With DC Comics presents Hawkman, was this a thing that you got when it came out?
Absolutely. I mean, this is totally my jam. It was then, it is. I love the nostalgia. Again, because I was brought up originally on those Silver Age comics, even though I'm not quite that old, although it was nice of you to mention 50 years of collecting. Just going back and seeing how modern writers and artists would, do the Julius Schwartz thing of sort of being inspired by the original cover drawing and seeing what they would do with them. It was absolutely brilliant. And when they came out, they did come out over 2 months. In my mind, they were a fifth week event, but in fact, they weren't a fifth week event, were they? Yeah, I bought them all, and I just really enjoyed them. That's pretty much spoiled my opinion of the issue, but they were just great fun. It's just really, really sort of just a real shot of nostalgia. Absolutely great fun. New nostalgia, probably not a thing, but I bought every one. How about yourself?
So this came out after I was done as a retailer. And in that time period, since I literally had unfettered access to whatever new comic books came out, I read a lot more stuff as a retailer than I did when I had to go back to buying my own books. And with DC, I was such a huge DC guy in the 90s, but getting into the 2000s, that started to get affected by the D.E.O years and the D.E.O mentality. And so this was an event that I mostly skipped on. I did like the ones that I did read. I appreciated what they were trying to do, but I just didn't commit to buying all of them. So it was years after the fact before I finally picked this one up and read a copy.
Have you ever been collecting all the whole lot of them? Probably not.
What did you think of the cover on this one?
The Hawkman cover, it's absolutely, totally eye-catching. I mean, just seeing, and with the gorilla, who can't resist a flying gorilla? I mean, the scariest Hawkman villains were the Manhawks, but anything with wings fighting Hawkman, that's a good thing. And the original Hawkman cover by Murphy Anderson, it's just a stunning image. The physicality of Hawkman, the musculature, I mean, he really knows his Michelangelo, it seems. And just seeing this huge, great gorilla beating down on Hawkman, absolutely wonderful. The original has the word balloon, got to bring my mace up before that massive fist comes crashing down. Exciting stuff. And again, you get a good blurb. Thrilled to the most amazing battles ever fought on the world where evolution ran wild. Brilliant stuff. Looking at the revamp, it looks very, very good. And it does look different enough. I mean, it doesn't pop the way the original does in terms of the colours. It's just too grey, too purple. I like the original light blue background better. They've coloured in the stripe on his boots wrong, which, is a little tiny thing, but, these things matter. I miss the fun of having the word balloon. I mean, at what point did we get too cool for word balloons, thought balloons, blurbs? It doesn't really tell you much about the story. Okay, it's pretty much happened to represent, I think, 2 stories. It's fine, But I think I would rather do an exact version of the colour concept. You've got different artists doing it, so you've got different sort of weights of inking and what have you, and slightly different sort of positioning. I'd rather they just took the idea of Hawkman being attacked by a winged gorilla and just did something themselves, because to me it's like it's not different enough to be worth doing. And you don't have the exciting blurbs, and it's just duller in the way, as I say, in the colouring. It's good. If I hadn't seen the original, I would like it more, but I do prefer the original. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm exactly on the same page as you. Jose Luis Garcia-Lopez is fairly unimpeachable when it comes to rendering the iconic DC characters. Here he's inked by Kevin Nolan. I don't think they're bringing out the best in each other, though. I don't really see the personality of Nolan over the Garcia-Lopez. And I will admit that the motion is more fluid. Like it really feels more like these people are moving around in space. Where with Murphy Anderson, it's definitely stiffer, definitely very posed. But the Murphy Anderson has the charm to it. I really love his feathering techniques. They feels like everything's rounded in a way to where it feels more depth, where things kind of flatten out on this version of the cover. And I also agree with you. In around the 2000s, everybody decided they wanted to start writing screenplays instead of comic books. And I think that they kept working against the strengths of the medium, trying to do movies on paper. And I think that it's diminished the medium as a result of that. I do like that there are a few people that are starting to bring that back again, and I hope it becomes more of a broader movement. I also miss the word balloons, but mostly I just really like the way Murphy Anderson draws. He gives those characters such weight and such personality, and I think that it's lost in the recreation. It's a nice enough cover on its own, but once you look at the original, it's hard not to just favor the original because it's just a better piece of artwork, I feel like.
It is all around. It's just more fun, more comic booky. I'll take that one.
We'll go ahead and move on to our first entry. And of course, it makes sense that we would start out with Hawkman. The Silver Age Hawkman was recreated by Gardner Fox with Joe Kubert for the February-March 1961 cover dated The Brave and the Bold number 34. For those keeping score, the 3-issue introduction and trial run of Cave Carson is what separated Hawkman from the Justice League of America's run. Also for the record, Cave Carson got a couple more trial runs and anthology titles, then vanished for 18 years. Likewise, Hawkman was not an immediate success, getting a second 3-issue trial run a year after the first, and after another year, shared 5 issues of Mystery in Space with Adam Strange. The Silver Age Hawkman dressed more or less like the Golden Age version, but cast aside the mystical reincarnation mumbo-jumbo in favor of Flash Gordon-style science fantasy. An alien from the planet Thanagar, the phonetically familiar Katar Hall, first name spelled with a K and last with an O, was the son of noted scientist Puran Katar. Puran was an ornithologist who invented the nth metal and flying rig that he gave to Katar at age 18. The planet was plagued by manhawks, intelligent thieving raptors who wore Michael Myers-type blanched Halloween masks and fired lasers out of the eye holes. Katar used the flying rig to help defeat the manhawks, and eventually it formed the basis of a winged police force, of which Katar was a member. Within the next decade, the wingman Katar Hall traveled to Earth in his rocket ship in pursuit of an escaped criminal. Hawkman used a mix of archaic melee and advanced scientific weaponry to bring in the shape-shifting Biff, but remained stationed on Earth to learn about our planet's unique policing methods. It was a bit of a stretch, since Katar's ship included a device called the Absorbiscon, which could extract the most obscure information from Earth while remaining in orbit, such as how to speak the language of birds to command them. Regardless, Katar Hall took on the false identity of museum curator Carter Hall, just like in the Golden Age, and helped himself to the ancient Terran weaponry that he now had access to. Mavis Trent was his trusted aide at the museum, while Commissioner George Emmett was Hawkman's contact within the Midway City Police Force. Hawkman's Mystery in Space issues helped him flood the zone, alongside one-off team-ups with the Atom and Aquaman, ahead of the launch of his eponymous series with an April-May 1964 cover date. The book was a bi-monthly, with Murphy Anderson taking over the art chores. The title was not a raging success, only lasting 27 issues into 1968. The Atom was the first superhero to meet Katar Hall in 1963, they re-teamed in 67, and the Atom's book hosted him as his second billed co-star when Hawkman's title was axed. Around the same time Hawkman's title was launched, he'd become the 10th member of the Justice League of America, and that book was his main source of appearances throughout the 70s and into the early 80s. As should be a familiar refrain by this point for listeners of the podcast, Hawkman launched in multimedia via 1967's The Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure on CBS television. Hawkman appeared in both solo segments and as a member of the Justice League of America, voiced by Vic Perrin. A decade later, Jack Angel provided his voice on Super Friends. It might seem like they took their sweet time getting to the Winged Wonder, But you have to remember that the American broadcasting companies cycled through the same 16 episodes of Super Friends for 4 years before finally ordering a second season for Hawkman to be included in. Through the final season in 1985, Hawkman featured in 16 segments. The fine physical specimen, Bill Knuckles, originated the Thanagarian wingman in live action across 2 1979 Legends of the Superheroes specials on NBC. And hey, he got around all 3 major US broadcast networks. It took until 2005 to break onto basic cable though, toward the end of the 3rd season of Cartoon Network's Justice League. Now that was a long wait, but at least he was voiced by one of the Warriors, James Remar. Put a pin in that for later. Katar Hall's appearances picked up a bit after that, including the Batman, DC Super Friends, Young Justice, and Justice League Action, plus a bunch of cameos, with the T-1000 Robert Patrick being the best known of those voice actors. It seems like it's Lego Hawkman or nothing on the video game front. There's also a bunch of action figures, including 1984's inaugural lineup of the Superpowers collection, but I'm not producing the DC Toy Files podcast over here. On the other hand, this episode is basically going to be the JLA-Z podcast, although we'll have a few secret files mixed in. Our reference art comes from the December 2003 cover dated JLA-Z number 2. The text is by Mike McAvinney, colors by Tom McCraw with Wildstorm effects, and the art is by Jose Luis Garcia-Lopez, praise be his name, ? We see the bare-chested Silver Age Hawkman kneeling on some sort of natural precipice, likely in a desert of some world. He's looking fierce with wings outstretched, holding a spiked mace dangling off the side of the peak in his right hand. With his right knee on the ground, his left is outstretched, balancing his weight on his left foot. His left arm rests on his thigh, holding a chain in his hand that connects to the handle of the mace. For starters, what is your experience with Hawkman?
Hawkman was just one of the first heroes I came across. I was buying the early 70s Justice League. Hawkman was in there. Hawkgirl was only in there very occasionally because, of course, if you have a man, why do you need the woman, apparently? Obviously, she joined later on, but at that point, you only have Hawkman in there. He wasn't in the early 60s JLAs I inherited, but yeah, it was great to be able to see him probably not every month. It was probably about 8 times a year back then. And I liked him. It's such a spectacular design. The costume, whether it really does just come straight from the Flash Gordon Hawkman, but it's just so striking. I mean, the huge wings coming out of the guy's back, the way that artists like Joe Kubert would have composed the page, using the wings to help sort of shape the page. And I just liked him. I just love this science hero and his science wife. The mix, the idea that they had these super scientific weapons from the planet Thanagar, like the Absorber skull and what have you, but they also would be, belt people with maces and swords and things. It was just so imaginative, just absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I enjoy him in JLA. I enjoy him when you get him in the occasional backup in Detective Comics or sometimes even action. But yeah, I was only really able to start following him properly in the Bronze Age when he appeared in those 3 showcase issues with Adam Strange, and a few years after that, he got his own series back after the Shadow of Hawkman miniseries. But I just absolutely loved him. Really, really, really enjoy him. He's one of those characters, again, as with the Atom that we'll get to later. I don't understand how he can't hold a series.
Hawkman's interesting for me because I've talked in the past about the primordials, the superheroes that just existed before my conscious memory and they were just always a part of my life. And Hawkman's in this sort of like second layer where I don't remember being introduced to him, but I also don't feel like he was always there in the same way that some of these other heroes were. And I also can remember distinctly getting him confused with the 1967 Hanna-Barbera cartoon Birdman. Birdman, I thought, had a pretty good costume. He had a really good set of powers. And so when I would see the Hawkman solo bits in the Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure, he wasn't quite as impressive to me as Birdman, but also I literally was getting them confused. I thought one was the other for the longest time as a kid. So I gave Hawkman credit for some of Birdman's valor, I guess you could say. But I always thought that the visual was great. Both characters, I think, visually look great. And I do think that Hawkman overall looks more impressive. And certainly when you've got the medieval weaponry, he's so much more intimidating and distinctive in that way. So I definitely love the visual of Hawkman. I was always impressed by that. That's why when the Superpowers action figure came out in 84, that's one of the ones that I bought. I loved squeezing his little legs together to make his wings flap and such. But I didn't really have a lot of opportunities to buy Hawkman in comic books because, I guess he was in Justice League, but Justice League distribution in my area was spotty. And at that time, the art wasn't the best. You'd get like a gorgeous just George Perez cover, then you'd open it up and it'd be not George Perez by a country mile. And so I just wouldn't really buy it that much. But I do remember picking up the New Teen Titans number 19 at the 7-Eleven. I specifically remember that one because, again, for once, George was on the inside of the book too, and doing a really great job. His Hawkman looked so impressive. And also they were fighting these like Hindu god beings who were scary. Like I thought they was as close to horror as I was comfortable with in that time period, where they were just like so menacing that it was that much more impressive for Hawkman and the Titans to take these things on. But also I had an issue of Brave and the Bold, number 186, that had the Fadeaway Man, who was a lot less impressive than the Hindu god guys, but it was still a fun team up with Batman by Michigan Cohen and Aparo. So that's one of those books that was always like sitting in my stacks of comic books. I don't remember actually buying it, but it was in my possession for years, so somehow I ended up there, and I'm sure Hawkman had a lot to do with that. But also, you had the house ads for Shadow War of Hawkman, which were so super impressive to me, where he's putting on the spiked cestus, and he's surrounded by these shadowy monsters. And again, I recalled that New Teen Titans, where it's like, this guy is a badass, and this guy's going to have a Shadow War, and I'd love to see more of this. And that thing just never hit the newsstand where I was. I only saw the house ads. I never got to see any of the individual issues. So really, one of the first times I got a chance to actually buy a Hawkman comic book was all the way out in like 87, 88 or so, when John Byrne was doing Action Comics and it basically turned it into his own version of DC Comics Presents. So he did an issue where I think, if I remember correctly, he was resolving the Shadow War because they kicked Tony Isabella off the book and took it over from him. And so I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's how the Shadow War ends. I wish I'd gotten to see a little bit more of that. And then he was popping up a lot in that period because he was in Millennium. He was in Superman 18 that was drawn by Mike Mignola, and Action Comics number 600, as I recall, where he helps to take Kal-El back to where Krypton, the area of space where Krypton used to exist, because he needed to fix something in himself. So I slowly, as the 80s progressed, got more exposure to him. JLI, where he was the guy who was constantly bickering with the other members and talked, this isn't what the Justice League used to be. This used to be a proud organization. It wasn't full of Guy Gardners back then. And so that definitely affected my perception of the character as being just this hard-ass guy, because he was always the one who was coming down on the goofy people of the JLI period.
Yeah, but you probably do remember that was actually retconned to be a Thanagarian spy Hawkman.
Oh boy, yeah. See, I'm still not sure how and if I'm going to have the opportunity to approach all that retconning, because
don't bother. Do not bother. I've been trying to make it work in my head, and it's like there's no way that was a spy in those other. That was Carter and Shiera. That was not Felander and Sharon. Poor Sharon got blasted to death in Invasion, the Earth Woman playing Hawk Girl, but yeah, it was just a mess. I mean, John Ostrander, bless him, he tried his best. It made sense in the issue where it was explained, but if you think about it, forget it.
Well, and the simple fact is, I enjoyed those characters as they were represented there, so I would have liked to have seen more of those stories with them instead of them killing off one and turning one into a villain that never shows up again, for the most part.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not into this idea you've just got to keep explaining. I had this idea for a brief time after the first Crisis on Infinite Earths, that for a while, the DC universe was plastic, and, things were, if there was something that was an inconsistency, it was because things hadn't settled down. And I'm happy just to assume, and I don't even need it explained in a comic book, just to assume that occasionally things bleed in from, in fact, they did explain it in the Hypertime, didn't they? Things bleed in from other areas. Just don't worry about it,
You're right. Hypertime. Send it to the field. Hypertime.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do we think about the artwork?
I like it. To me, if you're going to have a pin-up of Hawkman, he doesn't necessarily have to be flying, but you should see the whole wings. And here, it's a really nicely drawn figure. He's powerful. I quite like the positioning of him on the rock, with his one knee on the rock, one leg up. But you can't see the wings. The wings are just cut off. It's like it makes him, look like he's got little tiny stunted wings. To me, it just seems not quite right. I don't know. It's the mace is as scary as ever, but no, he should be either flying with the wings or he should be posed with the wings. Too close in Batman, you don't get the dramatic cape flaring out. These are parts of the iconic silhouette that makes a character so recognizable. Is it just me?
Not from my front. I know I've been a real heretic lately, because between DCU Legacies and then the cover to this Hawkman edition and then this artwork, I'm just keep beating up Jose Luis Garcia-Lopez. I'm not praising the name of late, and I feel badly about that. But one of the things I love about his work is how polished it is. And here, I think he's being rough on purpose because he's trying to give you that grittiness of his interpretation of a Hawkman here. And I don't think it works all that well. I don't feel like this particular version of Hawkman works as a gritty character. And like you said, most of the wings are mostly black, and there's even an eagle in the background that's being obscured by the silhouette of the wings. So even his vision is being marred.
I didn't even notice that. I thought that was just like a bit of the wing looking tatty.
Yeah, just let the guy come down a little bit lower so we can see the Hawk's wings at least. But no, we can't see Hawkman. We can't see Hawk. And yeah, it is weird that he's just sort of sitting on this plateau in a desert somewhere. It's a nice enough image. It's better than anything I could ever draw. So I'm not in a position to criticize in that regard. But based on a scale of Jose Luis Garcia-López, it's on the lower end for me too.
Absolutely. Yep. We'll get this when we come to the Atom equivalent. But I'm wondering whether, in fact, Jose Luis Garcia-López maybe did draw the wings, and maybe just the editors just cropped in too closely.
Yeah, formatting was a big deal with all these sort of secret files and who's and everything else. So it could have been a situation where he had a larger piece that got its wings clipped, so to speak.
Yeah, because I mean, Jose, he was the king of the licensing art. If he's been asked to give you a poster type picture, surely he would give you the best view of them without any clutter cutting things off that you could do. I'm going to give him sort of medium praise be his name for this, given the assumption of goodness.
Right. Okay, so I guess we can move on to Hawkwoman in a lesson on how erasure works. The Silver Age Hawkgirl was recreated by Fox and Kubert for 1961's The Brave and the Bold #34. Gardner Fox had previously introduced Shayera Sanders with artist Dennis Neville as part of Hawkman's first appearance in January 1940's Flash Comics #1. She was the reincarnated ancient Egyptian princess who formed a triangle of fatal passion between her lover and their killer, Hoth Set. Sheldon Maldoff drew the first instance of Shayera donning the Hawk gear for June-July 1941's All-Star Comics #5, but she wouldn't properly become Hawkwoman until that December's Flash Comics #24, 2 years into her existence. She almost immediately switches to the arguably diminutive Hawkgirl, which is less unwieldy to say, and likely how the character is best known among general audiences. Anyway, in the Silver Age, Hawkgirl was Hawkman's wife and policing partner right from their very first news story, as would continue to be the case for the next quarter century or so. Shayera, spelled with a Y in the first name and a T in the second, was an inexperienced female wingman, which angered her new partner, Katar Hall. However, he was almost immediately attracted to her, and when she helped crack the case of the Rainbow Robbers, Katar soon proposed to Shayera in front of the waterfall that had been their hideout. After their marriage, the couple traveled to Earth, where Shayera also worked at the Midway City Museum and quietly seethed over the flirtatious Mavis Trent. While Hawkgirl had most of the same adventures as her man, she was deemed redundant for the Justice League of America's purposes, and so only made sporadic non-member appearances. After the Hawks lost their book in 1969, that meant she was only in one story each in 1970 through 71, 2 in 72, 1 in 74, and skipped 1973 entirely. 1975 started her comeback, with increasing JLA-Z guest spots, and the Hawks getting a rotating backup feature in Detective Comics. Also in 1975, Thanagar was hit by the Equalizer Plague, a proto-MAGA where the entire planet becomes cruel, middle-brow fascists without any joy or creativity. The women's movement finally reached Hawkgirl in 1977's Justice League of America #146, when she was awarded full membership. That same year, Hawkgirl was also an official Super Friend, which was represented in the show's tie-in comic. In 1978, the Hawks helped bring the venerable showcased anthology to a close, paired with their former co-feature Adam Strange for the 3-part Rand Thanagar War arc. Supposedly at the end of this, the old JLA villainous Hyathis cured Thanagar of the plague and was given control of the planet as a reward. The Hawks still decided to steer clear though, and most doings involving Thanagar going forwards trend toward the sinister. For instance, in the 1985 miniseries The Shadow War of Hawkman, an advanced force of Thanagarians used the technology of a classic Hawkman foe to lay the groundwork for an invasion of Earth. Hawkgirl appeared to be killed by them, but it was actually artist Mavis Trent who was slain. Around the same time as the Crisis on Infinite Earths, a short-lived Hawkman ongoing series saw the Hawks continue to counter this initiative, as they were unable to trust any terrestrial heroes whose thoughts could be scanned by an Absorbiscon. After DC fired the architect of that story, it was swiftly resolved in a crossover with Superman, and the entire series was more or less retconned out of existence. Typically, Hawkgirl did not get in on the 1967 Boys Club cartoon action, waiting until 1977's second season of Super Friends, and only getting in on 5 segments through 1983. She was voiced by Shannon Farnan, who also did Wonder Woman, and Janet Waldo, best known as Judy Jetson, at least until the one-hit wonder Tiffany stole her spot for an animated film. Living Well is the best revenge, though, as Maria Canals Barrera gave Hawkgirl a voice in the 2001 Cartoon Network Justice League series. The show's creators favored Hawkgirl as both a character and as a necessary gender balance, so she was a founding and core member of likely the most influential Justice League media among modern audiences. The show continued into Justice League Unlimited for a total of 5 seasons. That meant that the Hawkman character was largely sidelined, especially as Hawkgirl romanced Green Lantern John Stewart instead. As with most Crisis-era Hawkman comics, it was revealed that an evil Thanagarian with designs on Earth had taken on the Hawkman mantle. In the show's case, this was Hero Talak, voiced by Victor Rivers, who brought the first incarnation of the Justice League cartoon to a close in 2004. Literally right after Hawkman, in December 2003's JLA-Z number 2, comes Hawkwoman, who started using that name in the early 80s for the lib of it. The text was again by Mike McAvennie, and colors by Tom McCraw with Wildstorm effects. The art, though, is by Sal Velluto and Bob Almond, who'd worked together on the Marvel Knights Black Panther series that did most of the heavy lifting for the Marvel Studios version of T'Challa. Hawkwoman is flying above a major metropolitan skyline in the daytime, holding an odd bird-shaped spear between her hands at about rib level. Some doves are flying around the spear tip, while Shayera has her right knee bent upwards and left leg outstretched behind it.
Hawkgirl, I just absolutely adore her. There was no way you could ever read those early Hawkman comics, whether the Golden Age or the Silver Age, which is more, and Bronze Age, which is more cup of focus, is that a thing? Probably not. But, and not say she's entirely equal. It did not make any sense to me that the strip was just never called The Hawks or Hawkman and Hawkgirl, because she's there. Sometimes she was a little sidelined in terms of being a little bit of the silly 60s Mary Tyler Moore type wife. But generally, in the fighting, she's there. She's his equal. His name was in the title, so he maybe got to sort of have a little more agency. But she should have got co-billing, and I don't think she even got her own logo until she appeared by herself with Superman in, I think it was a Jim Starlin issue of DC Comics Presents in the mid to late 70s. She wasn't like Batwoman, who would be fighting sort of villains with a bat powder puff or a bat hairnet. She was just bashing people with the ace or something spiky the same way that her husband would. And she knew just as much about science. She was a cop, it's the same as he was, an archaeologist, the same as he was. And I just think Hawkman, when he was invited to join the JLA in the mid-60s or whenever, he should have said, not without my wife. They're a team. Hawkgirl was great. Should have been Hawkwoman a lot earlier. I'm a really, really big fan of Hawkgirl.
And this is definitely another one where she's not on the Filmation show. She's barely on Super Friends. So I just did not have a lot of exposure to her early on. Really, a lot of my exposure was after I got into DC Comics and started making a point of getting back issues. And so there was a slim trade paperback that collected the early Fox Kubert stuff from The Brave and the Bold. And so I remember reading that. And then also I went back and got the Shadow War of Hawkman miniseries and the first special where, of course, she's quite prominent. And as a Martian Manhunter guy, I eventually got a hold of the strip that was running in the Aquaman book in 1977, which she was a part of, and then JLA back issues. So over time, I've definitely backfilled the material that I didn't get to enjoy the first time around, including the DC Comics Presents that you mentioned that Starlin did. And I really, like you, I like this character. And because she's not as antagonistic as Hawkman, and she's definitely smart, and she's a good detective, and she fits the sci-fi role, I think, better than Hawkman running around with his bare chest and his melee weapons more often than she does. She works as a Silver Age character for me better, and Hawkman works better as a Golden Age character for me. And sometimes I kind of wish they would just like let him be the Highlander or whatever and let her be the Thanagarian. But I definitely like her, and she's a great addition to Justice League once she starts getting used. She's a wonderful foil for Hawkman. And honestly, I think the costume works for the most part better on her because she's got a better cowl design. The only thing is she loses the X straps, which I think is a big part of what makes Hawkman look cool. But otherwise, I think she's kind of like a better Hawkman than Hawkman. And that's kind of why I see why she made it onto the Justice League cartoon where Katar didn't.
That makes sense. Yeah, I love your idea of you could have a Hawkman and Hawkwoman or Hawkgirl strip where it's the Golden Age Egyptian Hawkman and the Bronze Age science alien Hawkgirl or Hawkwoman. That would have to be fascinating. It's a wonder DC hasn't got to that yet. But yeah, I love her mask, but I do like Hawkman's as well. Because I saw Hawkman with the ears, the wing ears first. When I saw the original early Silver Age ones, he hasn't got the ears because he got them as a promotion, didn't he? It just looks weird, even though that's more like what the bird would look like. Her mask is brilliant, but I like them both. I'd just like to see more Hawkwoman. I mean, she's around at the moment. I think we have Hawkwoman and Hawkgirl in the current DC universe, which isn't at all confusing. But yeah, she's great, and I'm glad she's getting the focus here.
I'm really glad she got her own mask too. I'm glad they didn't just do boy version, girl version. I'm glad she had her own profile and everything. That was a cool thing that they did for her back in the 60s.
Oh, Frank, they could have given her the same mask but made it pink.
Oh yeah, that would have been terrible. Although sometimes I do think that Supergirl kind of could have worked okay with pink. I see that the pink Superman shield on occasion. I know exactly what they mean. It's like, that would be kind of an interesting visual, but it's probably best they leave things as they are.
Absolutely.
What do you think about the artwork here by Sal Velluto?
I quite like it. It's not bad, but in my mind, in my memory, because the way she was drawn in the comics, she would never have told us Hawkman. But this Hawk girl, she looks cute, perky, but I think she should be looking, more elegant, a little taller. I imagine if Marcy from Peanuts became Hawk girl, she'd probably be a little more like this. Whereas I just think she should be taller and sexy. I mean, objectively, it's a pretty good drawing, and I'll enjoy the background coloured photo start, and I like the birdie and the sphere. I don't remember her having a spear, but probably something from the Midwest City Museum, and she could have used it on that horrible Mavis Trent in the museum who was always trying to steal Hawkman away. I like the picture. Again, I'm wondering if it's cropped in, because it just seems strange that we keep getting artists asked to draw the figures and they're not giving us the whole of the wings. It seems odd. Nah, she looks good. I mean, the bra, is it a bra anyway? The top looks a little too metallic, a little too shiny. It's a good drawing of Hawkwoman, but not quite there for me.
The midsection is a little wonky. It does feel like her torso is a little squatter than it probably should be. I definitely see where you're coming from with her. The anatomy's a little bit off, but I really like this piece. I think when we're talking about the wings, for instance, there might be kind of a Rob Liefeldian things where they're hiding the tip of the wings the way he would feet. But in this case, I think Velluto's within his rights, because he's put a lot of detailing into the wings. And I like how he's able to contrast the solid blacks with the cross-hatching and such. So the wings look really impressive to the degree that we do get to see them. And we get to see a pretty good portion of them. And I just like the way, the mask looks, her lips look. I love the rounded earth, that she's high enough above the earth where you've got that rounding effect to it. You were thinking that it might be some sort of a photostat, but I still think it looks cool regardless of how he got to this point. And I even the little, I assume they're supposed to be doves. They kind of look a little pigeony to me, but I do like that she's got more of a bird of peace thing flying around behind her, and we can actually see the whole of the birds. They're not obscured by her wings like last time.
That is a nice touch. She looks like a Greek goddess or something. She looks absolutely stunning in terms of the impact she makes in the image. It's good stuff.
And since I haven't mentioned it before, I've always really liked the little talons at the end of their boots. I just love that little element of their costumes.
It's wonderful. It really is. They've got their little birdie feet on their red backgrounds. Excellent stuff. And
also the Black Hawk style iconic emblems that they have are so cool. They were there before Thundercats by decades. I don't know why we don't have like truck labels and stuff, like stickers with that icon on it more prominently. That should have been a thing.
Yeah. It is. It's a classic. It's whoever designed them in the first place. It's just a winner. Love them.
Next on the Cartoon Network, when he soaks up the sun, the rescue's begun. He's Birdman. On the Cartoon Network.
The Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure.
Superman, Aquaman, all the superheroes. They always fight for what is right. Live with danger and adventure, they are men of might. Superman, the man of steel, performs super deeds with ease. Aquaman's the bold and daring king of the seven seas. Hawkman from another planet swoops upon the foe. Nothing stops the Teen Titans anywhere they go. Flash before the eyes who follow with the super speed. Against the force of evil, the Atom will succeed. Green Lantern's power ring can accomplish anything. Superman, Aquaman, all the superheroes are the Justice League of America.
Coming up next, Birdman and the Galaxy Trio on Boomerang from the Cartoon Network.
Hey folks, I want to tell you about Magazines and Monsters, a podcast that's dedicated to comic books as well as classic horror and sci-fi films. This podcast channel contains a bunch of shows like the Bronze Age of Horror Comics, a podcast that's, well, it's about Bronze Age horror comics. There's also The Brave and the Bob, a show celebrating Volume 1 of The Brave and the Bold from DC Comics and all things Bob Haney. But hey, let's not forget the main show itself, Magazines and Monsters, which rotates between old-school horror and sci-fi films with a heavy emphasis on the British studios Hammer and Amicus. Plus, you'll get a selection of episodes about comic books, ranging from DC to Marvel and everything in between. So join your host Billy D and a few of his favorite friends for a fun and positive look at his 2 favorite pastimes. Find Magazines and Monsters now on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm caught in one of my own traps. There he is below, Avenger, caught in one of his own traps.
Birdman takes to the skies to protect the planet's earthbound residents, and he does it all with an environmentally clear conscience. This superhero is solar-powered. Saturday at 12:15 in the Power Zone.
According to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, DC Comics presents The Atom #1 was released on August 18th, 2004, but bore an October cover date. It featured a $2.50 US cover price and was edited by Eddie Berganza. Cover art was provided by Brian Bolland. Recreating Gil Kane and Murphy Anderson's 1963 cover to The Atom #10, famed DC Comics editor Julia Schwartz stands on a city rooftop ledge, lobbing a grenade over the side, with a tiny titan pinned to it by metal cuffs at his wrists and ankles.
The Atom cover, yes?
Indeed.
Indeed. Well, look at this Atom cover. So what do we have? Yeah, so we have this classic version of the Atom cover on the inside of the comic, which is Atom #10, and the original is very much, again, like the revamp. You've got Atom tied to a hand grenade being thrown off a roof by a guy wearing I think it's called a Baker Boy hat. And the top of the grenade, the pin's coming out of the grenade, so it's going to explode. Big danger. With the Atom, they always tried as often as they could to, even though he's just, the world's smallest superhero, to make him look big on the cover so he's not lost. And this is just the perfect way. He gets thrown out at the reader. Absolutely wonderful design. And in the revamp, again, it's technically very good from Brian Bolland. It just doesn't have the same dynamism. I mean, it's fun that you've got Julia Schwartz, whose comics these are a tribute to, now throwing it off the roof. That's a lot of fun. That's the only difference, really. It doesn't seem to have the same life. Again, I repeat the note that we've both made. That, if we hadn't seen the originals, we'd probably like these a lot more. This background, you've got the more naturalistic sky clouds background in the newer version, which I don't think you need. I mean, I like the original version with the white sort of shock lines from the Atom's head and the white sort of speed lines from the grenade being thrown off. It's more realistic in terms of the way the building's drawn. Gil Kane got the angle right, the composition is perfect. Yeah, I don't know. Atom looks a little bit better endowed, if we may say that, in the new version, but that's nice for the Atom. But I prefer the original comic. I also prefer the original colouring on the logo. The original logo, it's the logo very, very close, 80% based on the original logo, but the original logo colouring, the yellow, the red drop shadow, to me is better than the reverse that we get on the new version. So I would take the old version. How about your good self?
Now I'm just thinking like, hey, baby, I may be the Atom, but I'm proportionate. Don't you worry.
Yeah, he's got his full 6 inches.
Nothing atomic down here. It's a much narrower margin call. I still prefer the Gil Kane, in part because I definitely am a big Gil Kane guy, but I'm no one to slag on Bolland either. That one gigantic artist edition I have is the Brian Bolland art edition. I love his work so much, and I love that fine detailing. But yeah, it doesn't have quite the same life to it. The coloring is just too dark, and that's I think the biggest problem. Like, I can't even make out hardly the Atom symbol on his belt. It's pretty subdued on his head. The grenade itself looks great because of the shading they put onto it, but it's that hyper-realistic shading where I don't necessarily need realism in my comic books. I love that Julie's the one throwing the grenade. Generally speaking, it's not quite as good as the Gil Kane, but it's pretty darn good. So I'm not going to slag on it too much. I'm not nearly as critical of this one as I was of the previous one. I think in part because Bolin is such a Silver Age fan himself that I'm sure he put his best effort into that. And I think it's a great effort. It's just Gil Kane was the guy who conceived this stuff, and he's just doing a copy of what Gil Kane did. So you're obviously going to favor the original. Plus, again, that brighter coloring helps.
I'm with you, sir. I do like actually the blurb. We do get the blurb on this one, exactly the same blurb as the previous one, except it has 2 action-packed stories, but featuring Ride a Deadly Grenade, which is nice. Favour the original, certainly, but Brian has not shamed himself.
And speaking of the Atom, for once, Gardner Fox was not revisiting one of his own Golden Age heroes for the Atomic Age, as he joined artist Gil Kane and editor Julie Schwartz in reimagining the concept of the Atom in comics. Ray Palmer made his first appearance in the October 1961 cover dated Showcase number 34, preceding the title that launched the Silver Age incarnations of The Flash, Challengers of the Unknown, Lois Lane, Adam Strange, Green Lantern, Sea Devils, and Aquaman into their own titles. Also Space Ranger and Rip Hunter, but they can't all be winners. Unlike the Atom, yes, I meant that unironically, the basic premise of the Atom's 3-issue tryout, and a chunk of his ongoing series, is that Ray Palmer is an accomplished scientist working out of Ivytown University. His girlfriend, Jean Loring, refuses his constant marriage proposals because she wants to establish herself as a criminal attorney. They're both still in their 20s, and she's putting her career first, which was a completely unreasonable position to hold for the barefoot and pregnant preferences of mid-20th century America. Palmer is also professionally frustrated, as a super dense fragment of white dwarf star material that he had personally acquired, then used in a shrink ray, had a nasty habit of also blowing up any given shrunken object. Professor Palmer got wrangled into leading a field trip, getting trapped with his students in a cave-in. The only way for his charges to survive was for Palmer to use his white dwarf material, filtered through the diamond engagement ring always in his pocket, to shrink himself. Hoping that he would be able to get help before exploding, a variable in this process allowed Palmer to not only survive, but to regrow and re-shrink himself. He then created a belt to achieve that effect at will, and a tiny superhero costume would be stretched so thin when at normal size as to become invisible until he reduced himself into the Atom. Rather than being motivated by altruism, though, the main point of Palmer's shrinking escapades was to surreptitiously assist Jean Loring's lawyering until she was successful enough to finally agree to marriage. In the meantime, though, the Atom added scientific inquiry to his motivation, as he often teamed up with his associate, Professor Alpheus V. Hyatt, to explore his discovery of a time pool. Basically, it was a small rip made in space-time that only someone who could shrink would fit through, and so the Atom went. The eponymous Atom title launched a season after the Showcase run, with the same creative team. Within a year of his introduction, the Atom joined the Justice League of America with their 14th issue, released between the 2nd and 3rd Atom issues, and it would be 2 years before another new member was inducted. The Atom number 7 hosted the Mighty Mites' first team up with Hawkman, who was comparatively struggling to find traction in the Silver Age. They reteamed a few years later in the Atom number 31, a portent of things to come. As with Green Lantern, Gil Kane was the primary artist on the title through 1968, usually inked by Sid Green. A key difference, though, was that the early years of Hal Jordan were finished by journeyman Joe Giella, while Ray Palmer was embellished by Murphy Anderson. The Atom was more of an art book, and a better showcase for Kane's developing Kirby-influenced physical dynamism. As DC Comics struggled post-Batmania, the Hawkman title was downsized. The Winged Wonder moved into the higher-numbered Atom's title as second-build co-star. His story is usually drawn by either Joe Kubert or Murphy Anderson, with Kubert replacing Gil Kane on the covers. Dick Dillon was the successor on the Atom solo strips, although the Atom and Hawkman would sometimes have book-length team-ups that were usually done by the Hawkman's creators. The conjoined title only managed 7 issues before being canceled with the October 1969 cover dated number 45. As was the way with Justice League of America members displaced with the changing times, the Tiny Titan made the team book his primary residence. Aside from the odd team-up or guest appearance, this was the case until 1973, when the Atom became a rotating backup in Action Comics until 1976, and then again from 1980 through 82. Ray Palmer did not shrink from his duty to represent DC Comics in the earliest waves of television cartoons. He was in solo and Justice League team segments on the 1967 Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure, voiced by Pat Harrington Jr., also known as Schneider from the 70s sitcom One Day at a Time. Starting in 1977, the Atom joined the Super Friends in their 2nd season, appearing in 7 segments through season 7 in 1983, voiced by Wally Burr. For his period-specific cameo in the 2008 DTV adaptation, Justice League The New Frontier, Ray Palmer was voiced by Corey Burton. The Atom sadly did not rate inclusion on any of the 1967 Justice League of America board games, and they even let John Jones onto those things. He was also overlooked as an option for the toy aisle, most egregiously being left out of the Superpowers collection.
Just love him. Ray Palmer. I believe the name came from a science fiction author pal of Judy Schwartz. Yeah, he had a cool job. cool girlfriend, cool power set, cool adventures, excellent villains such as Jason Woodrue and Chronos, the time thief. As I was saying previously, I don't understand why he can't support his title, because, I mean, where's the kids' imagination that they don't support someone who can shrink down to subatomic sizes and just beat people a lot bigger than him? I mean, he had such great stories back in the Silver Age with not just the time thief, but you had the time pool, so you could go in the past and meet people. And in the 80s, they tried to increase his fan base, make him more popular by sort of giving him extra atomic powers in the Roger Stern Power of the Atom series, which I really enjoyed, but he didn't need those to be cool in the first place. I'm a big Atom fan. When I was reading the 60s Passed On Justice League, I came up to the issue when Atom joined. Was it Cavern of Deadly Spheres? I'm not sure, but and the Atom joined and they gave him a little tiny chair. It was so cute, and I love the Atom. The modern Atom, Ryan Choi, great, but he doesn't get a chance to shine these days because Ray Palmer's around. But I love the Atom, and they've changed his costume recently, and it's an absolute abomination. This costume, this Gil Kane costume, fantastic. He got it right first time there. So I love the Atom. How about you?
I'm definitely with you on the whole costume thing. They keep thinking, oh, well, we need to fix the costume. We need to tweak the Atom's costumes. Like, this dude has one of the single best costumes of the Silver Age. I've heard people talk about the Flash costume over the years, all the crimson. I don't get it. I think it's an all right costume. The Atom's costume is so much better looking. It's so much more dynamic. Everything on his costume is sort of like propulsive. You really see this guy. Like, he's a tiny little figure on most covers or most of the time in his adventures, but you never miss him because you got that distinctive red and blue. Such a great suit. And anytime they try to change it, I just think you're telling on yourself that you don't know the aesthetics of costumes very well if you think you need to fix anything on this dude's suit. It's one of the best things about the character. Now, as far as the appeal of the character, I kind of understand why he's had issues, because when I was coming up, he was not someone who popped up in Super Friends often enough to where I knew him from Super Friends. I knew him from the Filmation 60s show. That would show on like afternoons in syndication because it was a rerun, an older rerun, clearly. Now, I had a disproportionate sense of how popular Atom was because he got his own segment on the show, even though it was only 3 individual segments. But to me, that put him on an upper echelon. He wasn't maybe Hulk or Spider-Man, but he was definitely in contention to be like a Captain America type, right? But one of the problems he had was in that same time period, there were so many shrinking characters. Like when he came out, he was obviously borrowing heavily from The Incredible Shrinking Man, both the book and the film adaptation that preceded him. Yeah. But then afterwards, especially in the 70s and 80s, it was such an easy effect to pretend like somebody was shrunk and either superimpose them onto an image or have them be around big props. Lily Tomlin's The Incredible Shrinking Woman was out of that time period. Not long after, you had the Misfits of Science. Remember that one episode where they're shrunk and they're jumping on a Simon Says toy?
Land of the Giants.
Yeah, exactly. So there were so many people that were being miniaturized in that time period that it didn't make him seem as special because it was just an easy, cheap effect that they were using a lot in that time period. It was also weird to me because he was always just a 6-inch action figure. Over time, they started focusing more on him being able to get to an atomic level where he's able to like pierce force fields and do like more stuff like the Fantastic Voyage from the 60s where he's going into people's bodies and performing surgery. And when you get into that kind of stuff, his science brain comes into effect. His intelligence comes into effect that you can't just shrink a person and have them work on somebody's body in that way. You have to have learned people to do the stuff that he does with the shrinking powers that he has. And so I think that's what helps us set him apart again. But he lost a lot of years where he was just the person who got small and punched things. Even though I enjoyed those adventures, I enjoyed what exposure I had, he was just in competition with a lot of people who were doing the same things. And also on the Filmation cartoon, he had this horrible squeaky voice that was really irritating and really made him seem less than the other heroes. So that didn't help either, I don't think.
Oh, I've never seen those cartoons. I've not been lucky enough. But that's funny because I was actually, when you were talking about the cartoon, I was gonna ask whether they gave him a squeaky voice with him being a little character. Apparently they did. What did you make of the Sword of the Atom revamp?
Great. Yeah, and I didn't get to read that first run. I picked that up as a back issue. But it's Gil Kane. So right off the bat, I'm a sucker for that material. And they definitely gave him an edge. In fact, one of the things that's funny is that Hawkman, despite running around with all these maces and stuff, he's pretty non-lethal in the comics. At least maybe in modern times, I think they got him more violent. But really in the Bronze, Silver Age, he was swinging that stuff around, but he was mostly hitting like giant monsters and he was just kind of, wounding them. Where the Atom was a guy who would actually kill you. He was doing barbarian adventures where he's stabbing people and they were pretty violent too. So you knew that he was not somebody to be messed with.
Yeah. He was in a bad mood because his wife had left him. But I think, Gil Kane art, I read it every time. I love it every time. Brilliant stuff. And Gil Kane doing Barbarian stuff, excellent. I enjoyed his Conan. But I do not see the point of having the Atom having adventures where he's staying at the same size and he's among everyone else who's the same size and he's still wearing his costume, but you're putting a loincloth on his costume. It's like, what's the point of the Atom if he's not getting to really use his unique selling point much at all?
I see what you're doing there with the point thing.
So, and also,
who saw the point? Those little yellow guys that got stabbed by that dude. That's who saw the point. But yeah, no, I totally get it. That's a situation where they leave. Again, it's like we were talking about with Hawkman before, where you want him to have a flying gorilla because you want the gorilla you want to be disadvantaged. If he's flying above the gorilla, it's not a fight. But if the gorilla's flying, now you have a fight. So it's kind of like, okay, well, we're gonna have the Atom fight a bunch of other people that are tiny too. He won't have the same advantages. Although I think he still had more strength than those guys anyway. So I think he still did have an advantage, but it is kind of a cheat.
Yeah.
And it really is just a way for Gil Kane to get to draw barbarian adventures that also happen to have them riding frogs and, fighting in tall blades of grass and stuff.
Yeah. I think I was talking about Ray being in a bad mood. I think that first issue just put me in a bad mood because after everything that she'd been through in terms of sort of having breakdowns here and there, Lady Lawyer Jean Loring, to have her be cheating on Ray after all those years of wanting nothing more than to marry him and think, I just didn't like the fact that, they made the supporting character who hadn't had the best time of it, made her into the bad guy it's a kind of fridging because it just made her look bad to propel him into a new set of adventures. It was just, I'm glad that, by the time we got to Power of the Atom, him and Jean and Paul, the cheating man, that they were all, on much better terms again. But I just think Jean Loring, my God, after that they made her Eclipso, didn't they? Jean Loring's had such a terrible time as a supporting character.
Yeah, I'm of two minds because Jean was kind of always the worst. But also, come on, Leslie. She, especially in the latter part of the run, she was not great people. But also, he was the one who was constantly pushing her into marriage. Like the strip was based around him trying to figure out how he was going to get her to lay off the whole lady lawyer shtick and be his wife. And so him pursuing her through all those years, then she finally relents and marries him and then has second thoughts. I honestly think that was kind of believable. Like I kind of didn't blame her, to be honest, because he's pursuing all this time and then they'd go ahead and turn him into a Reed Richards where he's always off with the Justice League figuring out their science stuff and she's supposed to be twiddling her thumbs at home. So no, I actually kind of buy it. I really didn't have a problem with that because I didn't have a problem with her having a heel turn and I didn't have a problem with them getting him off the hook of being a married guy in that way because I can kind of see it being in Jean's character, to be honest.
Yeah. She'd certainly not been the most stable of characters, but I just felt for a bit. Because she had gone through the whole thing that all the superhero girlfriends do when they get married. We don't really tend to see it, but, the fact that they must at some point realise, well, Lois Lane said that you've been gaslighting me for X number of years. Flash didn't even tell Iris for a good while, for about a year, that he was the Flash. It's madness.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing too, is in no universe do I believe that Lois Lane would forgive and forget over that. Not the Lois Lane that I've been exposed to for my entire life. No, her marrying Superman after all that makes no sense to me. That's why it was better when they did it post-crisis, when most of the super dickery was stripped from continuity, and she learns relatively early into their existence together in post-crisis continuity. Pre-crisis, man, nah. I think that'd be a deal breaker.
Absolutely. Given the fact that she figured it out very early on, and it's just like, no, you're going mad, that sort of thing. Go and kiss an alien or something.
For the third time in a row, we return to JLA through Z for our entry, but this time it's the first issue from November 2003. As before, Mike McAvaney brings the text, with colors by Tom McCraw and Wildstorm Effects. Our line artists are Mike Wieringo and Karl Kesel, who repeated reducing images of the atom, running at the viewer through wavy speed lines of subatomic particles. So what do we think about the artwork out here?
Well, I find it hard to accept that it's a Mike Wieringo piece because it's just blooming awful. It's really got atom looking sort of fat and dopey. The head symbol's not even right with one ring too many. It looks like he's in a bowling alley. The words of the actual secret file details there, a couple of nice puns, but I just do not like this piece of artwork, and I don't know whether it was rushed or what, but it's just not. Mike Wieringo was so good. It didn't look amateurish because it's professional level, but it's just not good. I like the after images, but there's so much going on that they're almost lost. The coloring's maybe too colourful in terms of the atoms around them. I'm not keen, and yeah, it does look like he's got a sunflower on his head rather than an atom or whatever.
It's one of those where I think it looks great when you first look at it. And then if you look at it for very long, you start picking it apart. It's hard not to, because the anatomy on this one is strange. His leg is in a place where it really shouldn't be. And they're shadowing stuff away that doesn't really make sense in proportion to anything else on his body. Because it looks like he's shrinking based on the after images. But because of how he's coming at the reader, and because his body's so wonky, it feels more like he's coming from shrinking to growing. But that doesn't make sense because the after images are progressively darker and realizing him in that form. So the more I overthink it, the more I'm overthinking it. You know, I like the face okay. I actually don't mind the excessive rings on the atom, just because the classic atom symbol is such a common atom symbol, and so many other characters have that same symbol on them that I can see where they'd want to maybe tweak it, but it is too busy. I wouldn't want to be the person having to draw all those little the ovals to make that happen. And it definitely looks like it's something that they plugged in instead of something that was actually hand drawn. And it's weird too, because part of what I like about the image is the computer coloring. I like how they shaded the costume, and I like the skin tones and everything. But that after image where they're replicating it over and over again, it seems like kind of a cheat. It's like, oh, I don't have to draw as much of a background because I'm just going to draw, or just going to reproduce the same image of Ray over and over again. The way that the atom or the nuclei or whatever the heck's flying at you, it's a little corny, and you're right. It's not colorful enough, but it's also too colorful at the same time because it sort of buries him. But it's also kind of mostly this purple gray that's sort of boring. Yeah, I kind of like it and I kind of don't like it. I can go either way. If somebody said they liked it, I'd be like, yeah, cool. If they say they don't like it, I'm also like, yeah, cool. I see where you're seeing. I see the same things you're seeing.
I think it is the curse of the podcaster / blogger where we're looking at things so closely, we're not just being able to enjoy the image. But I mean, looking at the top left of the image, where I think it's, a little planet like with rings. For a second, I was looking at about the white background and thinking, oh, is that Chronos, just watching him sort of fall into the back and watching him shrink? But it's not a face, but I'm looking too hard at it. So yeah, maybe cut Mike Wieringo a bit of slack, but it's not great. And when you've got a character that you're used to seeing drawn by Gil Kane, it's just disappointing.
Yeah, but we're also used to seeing him drawn by early, rough Dwayne Turner and Graham Nolan. And there's a lot of guys that I wish were Wieringo that have drawn the Atom in his solo adventures. So again, glass half full, half glass empty. It's still a glass with water in it. I can agree with you either way.
Oh, you're a lovely man, Frank. A lovely man.
You know who's not a lovely man, though? Dr. Light.
He's absolutely not a lovely man, and he became less of a lovely man over the years.
Dr. Light was created by Gardner Fox and Mike Sekowsky for June 1962's Justice League of America number 12. There he single-handedly, if strategically, and by turns, took on the world's greatest superheroes, although they collectively took him out in the end. Thanks to a 1988 retcon, there was another Dr. Light who had created technology to become a superhero, but then Arthur Light accidentally killed him and took his stuff. Mind that a guy actually named Light, who is a scientific doctor and uses light-based powers for villainy, probably should not need some dude named Finley, whose ghost apparently still haunts Light, but can be temporarily driven off by the Light powers. Also, the guy who wrote that story went on to mostly do Archie comics, but deconstruction can be dumb, and it was just another embarrassment in a career that came to be defined by them. A year after his debut, Dr. Light was taken out by the Atom solo, keeping in mind that the two had never faced each other before. That should have been a nice turn for the Atom, who has never had much of a rogues gallery. Also, Light took on Green Lantern the following year, and then The Flash in 1967. Dr. Light was part of the team of established villains that fought the Justice League in 1968, briefly putting him in the company of Lex Luthor and the Penguin, even if Light is randomly paired against Martian Manhunter. Light then turned up a few months later in the final Gardner Fox JLA story, among other headlining villains of the Fox tenure. The 1970s were also pretty generous, cycling through bouts with Superman, Supergirl, and The Flash, sometimes in pairings, plus hassling the League now and again. Dr. Light's downfall seems to begin in 1976, when he first fought the Teen Titans, and then became a regular foe of the new Teen Titans for the first year or so. Dr. Light formed a new team to fight the Titans, the Fearsome Five, but ended up being worked over by those villains to help put them over with audiences. Dr. Light was portrayed as something of an incompetent coward, and that portrayal stuck. This set him up for a 1988 bonus book short story where Dr. Light was beaten by a new generation of Little Boy Blue and the Blue Boys. Then Light became a regular for a few years of Suicide Squad, which amplified his Titans portrayal, and that was pretty much it for Dr. Light's credibility going forward. That is until 2004's pivotal miniseries Identity Crisis, where Bronze Age fanboy turned best-selling crime novelist Brad Meltzer offered his own rationale. He posited that Dr. Light had at one point broken into the Justice League satellite, finding only Elongated Man's wife present. So Dr. Light assaulted Sue Dibney, a Silver Age darling and a popular supporting character, into the 90s. Light was discovered by the League, and taking a page from Mark Gruenwald's Squadron Supreme maxi series, Light was magically lobotomized by Zatanna in a group decision. This was why Dr. Light was rendered a joke, and several other villains were secretly subjected to the same treatment. No one that would have actually mattered, like the Joker or even the Reverse Flash. But why not tarnish the heroism of the League and cancel their best-selling series to usher in a parade of grimdark for the entirety of Dan Didio's years, casting a shadow over the company? In the aftermath of restoring Dr. Light to an exceptional degree of evil among DC villains, Dr. Light mostly just fought the Teen Titans again, just with more veiled threats of sexual violence against high schoolers. Having rendered the character radioactive, a version of the Spectre finally killed off Dr. Light just 4 years later, and his corpse served as a Black Lantern in the following year's Blackest Night event. New versions of Arthur Light turned up in the New 52, but we can blessedly stop here. In one of those brilliant examples of corporate synergy, the year before Identity Crisis, Dr. Light became a recurring villain throughout the 5-season run of the Cartoon Network's Teen Titans children's cartoon. Voiced by the unfortunately named in this context, Roger Bumpus, this version of Light was also in the various Teen Titans video games, and a decade on was on the even younger skewing cartoon, Teen Titans Go! In 2019, Dr. Light made the leap to live action on the streaming Titans show, played by Michael Mosley. I believe the first Dr. Light toy came out in 2001, as part of DC Direct's 7-piece Silver Age Justice League of America villain set. In 2009, Light was part of the first series of DC Direct Identity Crisis figures. In 2010, Eagle Moss put out a lead figurine packaged with an informational magazine, and I believe that figurine was re-released on its own in 2018. McDonald's offered a Light figurine with their Happy Meals as a tie-in with Teen Titans Go, and the literally short-lived heroic New 52 version got a HeroClix. Our first actual profile page of this episode comes from Teen Titans and Outsiders Secret Files and Origins 2005, which was released around October. Somehow Mike McAvinney is still our writer, with Identity Crisis' Rags Morales on art, colored by Richard and Tanya Ori, to the degree that it is color anyway, since it's 2 shots of a man in a black and white costume against a white, star-spotted, pitch-black sky. Arthur Light is crouching down with his bent knees far apart, his arms stretched downward, framing his nether regions, which are bleached out by the ultra-bright light source between his hands. Here Light has a sadistic broad smile, but in the blue-toned facial profile above him, his head is reared back and screaming, mouth wide open for his dental exam and/or magical lobotomy.
I mean, Dr. Light. I mean, he was one of the first DC villains I came across. He was in those early Justice League. In fact, yeah, I should have actually checked this, whether it was Dr. Light they fought when the issue when Atom joined. I'm thinking Carving of Daily Spheres, but no, that was probably the Maestro, the music. Anyway,
yeah, I think you're right. I think it was the Maestro of the music, because I remember the whole bowling pin thing that they did with that one.
Yeah.
So I think he just missed Dr. Light for his first appearance, but then he fights Dr. Light in his solo series, and I think he was one of the first, if not the first, people to fight him solo.
Absolutely, yeah. Making Dr. Light one of the first Silver Age utility villains. He was pretty good. I mean, Dr. Light, as villain costumes go, I think it's probably in my top 5 DC villain costume. It's just absolutely fantastically gorgeous, well-designed costume, using just 2 colors. He's instantly recognizable. He's got a fin. I love a fin. And I just hate the fact, I mean, I may be going too far in terms of our remit for history, but I just hate the fact that over the years it was decided that he was incompetent. He had just fighting the Teen Titans and being defeated by the Teen Titans, who regularly fought demons, aliens, top-level supervillains, being defeated by that bunch who were on a par with the Justice League in terms of power, if not more powerful at times, is no shame. And yes, there was that one DC bonus book in which he was defeated by Little Boy Blue and the Blue Boys, but in my mind, that's not strict continuity, and anyone can have an off day. So I don't think we needed an explanation down the line to say that, he was off his game because he'd been affected by Zatanna's magics, because he'd been raping superhero women. It's just, what a terrible way to make a character unusable. I mean, I just think it's really sad that we don't get to see the same Dr. Light. I mean, the second Dr. Light, she's just never been properly used. Good character, again in a great costume, but it's just a terrible way to treat a classic DC villain.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a really great costume, especially compared to some other Silver Age DC villains that we'll discuss later on. The fin has a shark-like quality to it, with him being black and white, that I think is neat. Like you, he was one of the earlier villains that I was exposed to because he was in that New Teen Titans story from 82, drawn by George Perez. I remember the whole thing where he's in prison and he uses a special light bulb to convert to light and escape. And yeah, he's also on the run screaming from the Hindu demigod things. But yeah, I would be too. They were scary. They were intense. I think the main problem was Marv Wolfman because they kept going back to him as a Titans villain, having him be the co-founder of the Fearsome Five, and then having them roll on him and dump him and replace him with Simon, who, I'm sorry, Simon is not the character that Dr. Light was. He doesn't look as cool. He doesn't have as cool of a power set. He didn't have the history. It was just a way for Marv to put his fairly lame villains over on an old school Silver Age villain. I think there's a reason why he got used in the cartoons, because he looks cool. He's got a good power. It's a good power for a villain too. It's a power that you can believe could take on either an individual hero or a team of heroes, depending on how they're applied. So he was a solid utility villain that I think the fanboys and Marv specifically nerfed. And it's a shame that happened, but once they started doing that dark stuff with him, Identity Crisis specifically, you can't do anything with him now. And the fact that they had cartoons that kids were watching at the same time they were doing that sordid business in Identity Crisis, that's just a failure of editorial. That's a failure of managing your intellectual properties. Beyond creative, beyond emotional investment in characters and stuff like that, this is a resource and you just didn't know what you were doing with this resource. You could have done that with, again, Simon. Simon, sure, okay, Simon did a horrible thing and we don't use him anymore. Who's going to miss Simon? You know, but Dr. Light said it's the stinking cartoon that the kids are watching at the same time you're doing the stuff in Identity Crisis. It's just galling and incompetent.
Yeah, it's like having Deathstroke in those Teen Titans kiddies cartoon. The guy's a pedo. It shouldn't be having them in there because at some point it's going to, as the kids grow up, it'll take them back to the comics, or the parents might buy the comics for them. When you read the comics, it's like, oh, there's this cute teacher in the Teen Titans school or whatever. He's not really a very savvy character, even for an assassin villain. Actually, and absolutely hate these villains that they claim are honourable. They're killing people for money. They're not honourable.
He has a code.
Oh yeah, the villain bro code, but nah, he's murdering people for money. Not good. But sorry, I'm supposed to be discussing Dr. Light, but Dr. Light, and then we have this Secret Files illustration. It's like you've got the best costume, or one of the best 5 costumes in comics for villains. I've decided, DC villains at least. And you can't see it. You're just seeing mostly black. You're seeing a huge amount of white, as if he's farting light or something like that. There's this really strange screaming person in the background. I don't know if that's a reference to a Dr. Light story. I can't remember. Or whether it was Dr. Light with toothache. I have no idea. It's interesting image in terms of lighting sources. It's very, very competent. It's striking. But it's not making the best of Dr. Light's costume. His face is totally black. It's just a very odd, perhaps daring, perhaps admirably daring choice of composition. I don't hate it as an illustration. I hate it as, well, don't hate it. I'm disappointed by it as a poster-style illustration of Dr. Light.
I scanned this myself. I scanned it from the original comic book, and I thought about trying to mess with the contrast to make it a more deep black. But as printed, it's a gray page. It's a darkish blue and gray page. And like you said, it's a black and white character costume, and you've rendered everything gray because there's too much black. If you do it as a solid black, it's kind of wimpy if you do it as a gray, but if you don't do it as a gray, then you're losing a lot of the detailing. He's got that sadistic grin, and then he's doing this Triple H, look at my crotch thing. It's hard not to make the association. I think they're attempting to make the association that it's very pelvic. They can't help but remind you. And they're trying to do it, I guess. It's not subtle, but I guess it could be more vulgar, but I don't appreciate it. And also, you've got the screaming head in the background. I like the indigo quality to it, but they've got the weird thing going on with the teeth. And also, it makes him look tormented, but I understand they're probably referencing the Zatanna mind wipe on the dude. And like, you deserve that. So I'm not feeling your torment here. And I really could use like a pair of Zatanna hands or something to make it clear that's what you're going for, because he's not really a tragic character. He's the creator of tragedy. He is the inflictor of tragedy. I'm not sympathetic toward this guy.
Not at all. Thank you for your actually having a bit more brains in this area than me, because that makes sense. Yes, screaming. But yeah, it's just not something that should be in the image at all. It's just, let's just have an absolutely brilliant picture of Dr. Light showing what he can do. I mean, I do like those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 star trails that are coming out of his hands or whatever. It's not brilliant for what it's trying to do.
And then getting on the identity crisis kick. I understand that there are a lot of people who feel like you can maybe move goalposts where these villains can kill people and do other kind of assorted things. And then things like a sexual assault is too far. But the thing is not many people are going to have a villain like rob their safe. But statistically speaking, a lot of the people who read comic books have probably experienced or known somebody who's experienced an act like that. And so it hits a lot closer to home. And you had Brad Meltzer writing that, and Meltzer does these airport murder mystery things. They're soap opera. They deal in that kind of stuff a lot. They're kind of built for it, and their audience is somewhat understanding of that. And within a novel, you can explore that in a way that's more mature. Comic books are much more about iconography. It's much more about boiling things down to their simplest elements in order to convey the story in a series of panels over the course of not that many pages. And so I don't think that you can have the nuance necessary to address what it means to have somebody like Dr. Light running around within a comic book unless that's all the comic book was about. And instead it was just about trauma dumping and trying to make the worst crime possible. Like they have to go out of their way and have Sue be pregnant while she's murdered. No, you're just laying it on thick, buddy. And it's gross and exploitative. And, again, I think there's a different moral quality to comics, like especially for old school fans. There's a lot of black and white morality in comics. And things get way too gray in Identity Crisis for the medium in which it's set. And I think that's a big part of the problem.
No, absolutely. As you say, there was no room for nuance in the comics, so it just becomes about shock. And again, the destroying Gene Loring some more in that comic, so not a great. I mean, again, I wasn't a fan of that comic anyway. When you have things like Deathstroke able to take down the whole Justice League in 2 pages or something, he's a one-eyed guy with super athleticism or something. It's ridiculous. Not great.
Let me kill Captain Boomerang. I'm going to give you somebody so much better in replacement.
Oh, well, really, Captain Boomerang Jr.
Yeah, no, definitely. I know it brought some people into the fold, but I'm never going to forgive that book for the things that it did. Even though some of the things it did quite well, but a lot of it was just so dumb and so fanficky that I can't get past that.
I'm with you. Poor Dr. Light, he deserved better.
And I don't think Jean Loring would ever, as bad as she was in the Silver Age, I don't think she'd ever do the things she did in Identity Crisis, in part because they don't really make any sense. And the whole murder mystery hinges on something that no human being would ever do. It was just so stupid. And again, in terms of motivation, if I just let Jean Loring off the hook because she cheated, because she didn't have the same devotion to Ray that Ray had to her because he was fixated on marrying her, but she's going to murder a friend of hers to try to win him back, that's like the easiest, there's not an easier way of doing that. The logic falls apart so badly at the end of that story that you'd have to have like pristine logic to make up for all the misdemeanors that were committed earlier on and the crimes were committed earlier on. And to end it on that, it's like, oh, this is just bad storytelling. This is a bad story because of that particular angle, because of that particular assailant. It was just so dumb that I dismissed the whole thing afterwards because of that.
Quite right. I mean, because DC were pushing it as we've got a big famous writer here. It's a proper murder mystery, but it's not a fair murder mystery. There were no clues in there where you could have guessed. And in the comic, it's like, weird, I can work it out now. Who benefits? And it's like, you could not work backwards and work that business about, sort of Gene wanted more attention. So, no. Absolutely terrible. Just mopey the whole thing immediately.
So on a lighter note, let's talk about DC Comics Presents Hawkman now.
Yes, indeed.
Visitor's Day by Cary Bates, John Byrne, and Larry Strucker, with Michael Attea and Jared K. Fletcher. The Grand Comics Database summarizes, Julie is instructed by 2 aliens to complete the story for the latest Hawkman issue, presumably Julie Schwartz. That story idea created a rift in the multiverse, causing it to unravel, and only the correct story ending will save everything.
I need these on file cards, I tell you. Right, DC Comics Presents Hawkman #1. And it has Julia Schwartz being visited by aliens. And they're very impressed by all the imaginary alien scenarios he's come up with down the years. And the aliens, you just want to pick his brains, really. You just want to talk about storytelling. Story in which sort of they had the cover that has Hawkman battling a winged gorilla, but there's no story. And when the cover was conceived, the aliens say, at that exact moment, an astral rift occurred in the multiverse, and thoughts from one plane of existence went to another. And basically, things got complicated. Hawkman's fighting gorillas. The Hawkman's sort of looking through some kind of dimensional rift. Meanwhile, we're going back and forth with Julia Schwartz talking to the aliens. And Hawkman finally, after fighting the gorilla for a while, seemed to go through the rift, wakes up in bed as the real Hawkman with Shiera. I mean, it's a bit of a mess, I thought. I mean, I'm sure you could probably lay out what happens in this story better than I could, Frank, but I didn't love it. Carrie Bates, outside of the JLA office when he was working with other editors, like post-crisis, he was much, much better on the likes of Captain Atom. But when he was trying to please Julius Schwartz, who just wanted surprises and novelty, it wasn't so great. It seems to be telling us, how Julius Schwartz and Gardner Fox plotted the Silver Age story in Hawkman 6. But I didn't quite get what happens, which is why I did such a poor job of explaining what happens in the story. I just thought it was a bit dull. I think Julius Schwartz might like it because it's just full of novelty and little surprises here and there. But I prefer the much more straightforward original story of just Hawkman fighting a gorilla with wings because of reasons. This was maybe trying to be too clever by just writing Julie into the story. What do you make of it?
For me, it was breezy fun. I enjoyed it as a tribute to Julie. Like you said, all these books are doing that. I thought that this one did a nice job of it. I didn't get lost in the details on this one because I could tell this isn't one to invest that deeply into. I also felt like they were doing a lot of referencing to a not particularly accessible old Hawkman issue. Most fans aren't going to have that particular issue of Hawkman in their collections to go reaching for. And this wasn't a DC retroactive where they reprinted the story they're referencing. These were two original stories in this special. So there's no easy reference for this, but they're making it, they're acting like you've read the story. And I guess maybe some of the people would have, but it's still 2004. I bet you a lot hadn't. I certainly haven't, because I didn't make it that far to the run. I read the Joe Kubert stuff. I really didn't read much of the Murphy Anderson stuff. If there was something in there that was an Easter egg from that story, it was lost on me. So I just kind of took it as it went. I thought the art for Byrne in his late period was particularly tight, which was great. I think he must have been enjoying himself on this one, but also Larry Strucker's inks were on point. So I thought it was just a good looking story. It reminded me of a version of John Byrne that I had missed for a while at that point. And it had a flying gorilla in it. Take it what it is, not think too much about it. It did end really abruptly. I just didn't care at that point because it managed to entertain me and I didn't expect a lot out of it.
I think maybe what I did wrong was I think I just reread the original story just before reading this, and maybe just wasn't quite able to appreciate this for what it was. I probably enjoyed it more when the actual comic came out in 2004. Going back to Silver Age and just having enjoyed the Silver Age version too much, and then just having this story about sort of how is everything put together. I don't know. I never really did enjoy those stories when, the creators of Earth 1 got to mix with, not Earth 1, the creators of Earth Prime got to meet the real Justice League. When you have Julius Schwartz meeting the Flash, or Carrie Bates becoming a villain, and Elliot S. Maggin also meeting the Justice League. I think it just maybe stretched things a little too far for me, and just to have another one of those type of stories here wasn't my favourite, but definitely the art is great. I don't like the colouring. I don't know whether it is the fault of the colourist or whether it's just the quality of the paper stock and how the colours were laying on the paper. Too dark. It's just too gloomy, the mood in both stories in the book. Not my favourite.
I definitely assigned you the wrong two specials to go with then, because we're getting a lot of that Earth Prime action here.
Delighted to have to be playing with you at all, Frank. Delighted.
We will return to Birdman on the Cartoon Network.
Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. Digging for Kryptonite is a forthcoming podcast series from Flat Squirrel Productions, examining the last son of Krypton across time and media. The show doesn't premiere until 2021, but I wanted to put out this trailer now to let everyone know about the podcast, tell you all a little bit about myself and what we're going to be discussing, and encourage you all to subscribe to the show via your platform of choice so that you don't miss our premiere or any subsequent episodes. I've been a Superman fan for almost 30 years now. My journey began when I was 5 years old. It was the winter of 1992, and my parents brought me to the Galleria Mall in White Plains, New York. We happened upon Heroes World, a part of the now-defunct comic shop chain. And in the window display, to advertise the death of Superman, was a Superman action figure in a small box to mimic a coffin. It immediately caught my attention. My parents bought me the trade paperback collection, and my father read it to me that evening. I was hooked. I would go on to read Superman's 4-color adventures throughout the rest of the 90s and into the 2000s. I watched Smallville religiously for a decade. I saw Superman Returns and Man of Steel at their midnight openings, and for a time, I even had vanity license plates that read Last Son. I'm also a defender of Zack Snyder's vision of the character, but we'll get to that. Over the course of this podcast series, we'll be presenting deep dives into the creative visions, character elements, individual stories, and eras that have defined the Man of Steel for more than 80 years. I'm planning to start with an exploration of the Jeff Loeb and Joe Kelly era of the comics from the early 2000s, which remains my favorite period as a Superman reader. With this podcast, I aim to revisit my favorite interpretations of the character, give another chance to those stories that perhaps didn't wow me the first time, and fill in the gaps in my own fandom. For example, I've only ever seen a few episodes of the George Reeves' Adventures of Superman TV series or the Fleischer cartoons, and, much more recently, I completely missed the boat on Sci-Fi's Krypton series. Each episode, I will be joined by at least one other guest as we geek out about Superman. I also want this endeavor to be as interactive as possible, so I want to hear from you, too, about your Superman fandoms. If you're new to my work, I also host a podcast called My Comic Shop History, and my latest documentary film, My Comic Shop Country, is available right now on iTunes and Amazon. If you are familiar with me, first, I thank you for following me over to this new show. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. I was originally planning to call this show My Superfan History, but I had a change of heart and decided to go with Digging for Kryptonite instead. The title takes its inspiration from a line in It's Not Easy, the iconic Five for Fighting song about Superman. I was in elementary school when the song came out, and I still remember the moment my mother excitedly told me she had caught a song on the radio that was about Superman. This was before iTunes, of course, so it took a little effort to find the artist and song. Just a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to see Five for Fighting live, and it was incredible. Thank you for listening to this trailer. I can't wait to take to the skies with you all on Digging for Kryptonite. As a reminder, we premiere in 2021, but in the meantime, be sure to subscribe to the show via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify. Follow along on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll be back with our series premiere before you know it. Until then, remember, it's about what you do. It's about action.
We now return to on the Cartoon Network.
Now, part 2 of the Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure. Starring one of these great superheroes in an exciting action-packed adventure of his own.
They are superheroes, the Justice League of America.
So let's go ahead and jump into Chronos then.
Chronos. Let's go to Chronos. I like Chronos. You know I like Chronos. You've read that I like Chronos. But I'll be telling people that I like Chronos any moment now. Oh, there he is. There's Mr. Chronos. God bless him.
Petty thief David Clinton had already spent plenty of time behind bars when he realized that time could be on his side. Stealing and developing time-related technology to commit his crimes, Clinton became the time thief Chronos. The supervillain is like clockwork when it comes to making life difficult for the Atom. Though the entire JLA has had to watch for Chronos' attempted manipulations of time itself on more than one occasion. As with Ray Palmer himself, Chronos was created by Gardner Fox and Gil Kane, debuting in the November 1962 dated The Atom No. 3. As referenced in the profile text, David Clinton was another, if especially badly costumed, Silver Age bank robber. Predated by the Clock King, his gimmick was also a predilection with time, specifically timepiece-themed gadgets and weapons. That works a bit better with a shrinking hero, because you can trap him under the glass of a wristwatch, or fire bladed gears at him that are proportional buzzsaws, or heck, you can just threaten him with an actual table saw. And Chronos did exactly that in his 3 appearances in the first Atom volume. In his earliest appearances, Chronos had a mostly featureless and skin-tight white ski mask that made him look like he was up to some Dr. Light business, but eventually evolved to be more time-themed and look like face paint instead. Chronos had an early win with his second and third appearances, joining the crime champions to hassle the JLA and JSA during their first team-up in Justice League of America number 21 through 22. Chronos was back battling the Tiny Titan in an elongated man team-up in 1967, then he joined the lackluster Injustice Gang in 1974, before taking a single swipe at Wonder Woman in 1975. Chronos' best group was probably the baseball team he was on in a 1976 Strange Sports Stories. Chronos as a time stream manipulating villain began to take shape in 1977, when he had a punch-out with Captain Comet over the danger of dinosaurs at large in modern times. The brief and unimpressive run with the Injustice Gang wrapped in 1978. Though Chronos never made it onto Super Friends, he was the main villain of a 1979 issue of its comic adaptation. The Crime Champions reunited in 1983 for a 20th anniversary two-part JLA-Z team-up, the one that infamously retconned Black Canary into being her own daughter. Chronos was the villain of a three-part World's Finest Comics arc that helped bury that venerable series, plus he figured into the Crisis on Infinite Earths. Post-Crisis, Chronos was the overarching villain of the first year of DC's Blue Beetle series, through Legends, and came back from Millennium a year later before that series wrapped. Like Dr. Light, Chronos was on a Suicide Squad, but much earlier and only for one mission. Chronos had one of the most hideous, overly busy costumes in all of comics. In 1988, the Power of the Atom series reasserted Chronos as a primary foe of the Mighty Might, and also gave him a new green uniform without a mask. While this highlighted his uncanny resemblance to disgraced former US President Richard Nixon, it also rendered Chronos about the most visually uninteresting classic DC villain, in what looked like Hydra casual wear. They didn't even bother to keep using him in Atom comics after that, but it was how he was pictured on his Impel trading card. I could have probably used that as an excuse to cover Chronos' 80s appearances later on, but I didn't figure he was worth 3 passes, so we'll end it here instead. I have to level with you, Chronos has never been popular or well regarded. So he didn't get on television until a 2005 multi-part episode of Justice League Unlimited. They used him as an excuse to do some time travel stories. He was then on a 2008 Batman the Brave and the Bold episode that featured both the Ray Palmer and Ryan Choi Adams, plus a couple of 2017 segments on Justice League action. Chronos sort of made it into live action on the CW Network's Legends of Tomorrow, but there he was a body-jumping temporal bounty hunter that was played by several series regulars. Voice actors for Chronos include Peter McNichol, Andy Richter, and Steve Blum, suggesting the lesser lane of villainy that he inhabits. To underscore this, it appears that we're still waiting for any form of official Chronos merchandise, a surprising omission for such a long-serving bad guy. I wrote more copy for Chronos than I meant to, because I thought for sure he had a secret file that I could use for his modern appearances, but that turned out not to be the case. So we'll reach back to November 2003's JLA-Z #1, with Mike McAvennie, Tom McCraw, and Wildstorm Effects along for the ride. The art is by Peter Pachoumis and Aaron Soud, a penciler I never heard of, who drew the 2000 Star Trek The Next Generation, Per Chance to Dream miniseries when DC Wildstorm briefly had the license. Aside from short anthology stories featuring Our Man and The Question, plus a little indie comic stuff, that's all the time Peter Pachoumis was given in comics. He does offer up a proper scene though, with a beaming Chronos exiting the steps of First Bank with a giant bag of money complete with $sign. His exit path is blocked by a police car, surrounded by 3 visible policemen firing on him. However, he's using millennial computer effects to do some timey-wimey distortion on their bullets.
In fact, no, what do I think of Chronos generally? I really like him. Again, he was in those early Atom comics that I inherited. I just love the idea of thief who does time things. In the early Chronos story, he was more using sort of clocks and things as gimmicks and sort of doing a lot of time shifting. But that came in pretty quickly within a few stories. And Chronos, it was the first time I'd ever come across the word Chronos. Because in the ancient Greek stories that I used to read as a kid, Chronos and the Titans didn't come into it very much. But I love him. I just find him in terms of, well, he's a clock thief and I find him striking. I just love the costume. I mean, yeah, it's busy, it's wonky, it's perhaps too colourful, but I love busy. I just love the pinstripe tights. I think probably he was anticipating the Carnaby Street fashion revolution of the 60s. I like the mask. I wonder whether it helped inspire Jack Kirby towards Mr. Miracle. Probably not, because he probably didn't look at other people's work very much, but it's very much like Mr. Miracle's mask, but washed out. And I like the fact that without the mask, he looked like Richard Dixon, I think, as Gil Kane has admitted. I just love, I mean, I like villains with capes. I just love that he's just such an out-and-out, outrageous, unapologetically, bizarrely costumed supervillain going around doing his business. And he's just fun. I do prefer villains that fight heroes that aren't the dark opposite of the villain. Some people seem to think that the villain just should have some kind of definite connection or be a dark reflection of the hero. I'm not bothered. I just want a fun character. And to me, Chronos is a fun character. And whenever he turned up, I was delighted.
Yeah, I'm going to go 180 on you on this one because this is seriously an all-time worst costume. If it made sense contextually for him to be this patchwork being, it'd be fine, but he's a time guy, so it's all incongruous. He's black and white, but he's also green and yellow, and he's got the red trunks and the pinstripe legs. It's just so much going on here. The watch hand mask and the hourglass chest symbol, or a hat on a hat, I think. And he's got the cape with the vampire collar. It's just too much going on. He's giving me Combo Man. He's giving me the Stanley card from Marvel Universe Series 1. But as much as I'm bagging on this costume, it's still better than that stupid green thing that he wore in the 80s in Power of the Atom, where he looked like he was something out of a Mystery Science Theater 3000 50 sci-fi movie or something. And it's nice that Gil Kane tried to warn us about Tricky Dick well ahead of time when he was just a politician. But I don't need to see Tricky Dick 24/7. Like, I put a mask over that, please.
Yeah.
But speaking of the mask, one thing I did like is in the earlier appearances, he had that sort of ski mask thing. It was really kind of creepy and fetishistic.
It was, yeah.
And
like Mr. Miracle type mouth.
Yeah, and then when he becomes Mr. Miracle, like that works better for me with a heroic character where he's like grading the line between a costume and like his regality as a being from the fourth world and stuff. Where this is just a guy who, like, I guess was painting his lips or something. So when I think about the logistics of it, for him, it's just a dude. It doesn't make as much sense to me, but he's also kind of creepier and weirder with the open mouth part like he had in the earlier adventures. So I kind of like the old mask, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's fair, because I'd actually forgotten when I went back and saw the first appearance that it was more of a ski mask, and it didn't really have the clock face design as prominent, if it was there at all. White masks are always quite creepy, not just the Joker with his Joker skin. And I'm a fan of Chronos. I'm
going to come back to him later on. As a guy who did time-based crimes, I don't like the costume he's wearing while he's doing it. But I did like the crimes. Like, I thought it was cool the way he would use the watch to shoot stuff at people, like the gears at people and such. And I don't know, that time-based criminals are kind of a cool little niche. So I do like that aspect of him. And he's a Silver Age Atom villain. There aren't a lot of those, especially not very many of them that survive the Silver Age, past the Silver Age. So I got to give him props for that.
Absolutely. I mean, he's totally outshone by Jason Woodrue in terms of long-lasting impact on the DC universe. I mean, as well as being a huge Swamp Thing villain, he got to join the New Guardians, but Chronos, not so much. But yeah, I like in the Secret Files image of Chronos, yeah, he's firing bits of clock or something at the cops. But to me, you could say it's the Ivy Town cops' Secret Files because they're so much more prominent. Yeah, you don't see their faces, but they're taking up all the foreground. He's quite small in the panel image. He looks good, but he's too small. I like the fact he's drawn, he's looking really, really confident. He's firing things at the cops. Who knows who's going to win? But I could just do with having a little bit more Chronos in the image here.
Okay, you either get the whole cape, you get the whole wing, or you got to crop it. You got to pick a lane. But no, I'm
never happy.
I like the image fine. I'm not familiar with this artist, and it's a little odd because the Chronos figure looks like a Scott Collins, but all the other guys around him look kind of like Abel Gachet or something. However you pronounce that name. But I do like that it tells a story. I like that you've got a whole scenario here. He didn't scrimp on that at all. I like, for a rare instance, where they use computer digital effects on an image, and I think it actually benefits the image. It makes it look cooler, and it makes it clear that he's using time powers to slow the bullets into bullet time and such. I like that he's robbing the first bank with a gigantic bag with a money symbol on it, because that's so comic booky. It's like, no, I'm not here to do horrible things on the JLA satellite to sue Dibney. I'm just trying to rob this bank, and these cops are in my way, and I don't care because I'm going to overpower them, and I've got a big grin on my face while I'm doing it. I'm down with this. This is a cool image for me. I enjoy it. And the dude really went nuts on the rocks. Like you say, he sacrifices Chronos to draw the cop car and the cop uniforms and the bricks and the doors of the bank. But I appreciate that he gave me a whole scenario. So and also it diminished the awful costume. So I'm winning on this one.
Yeah, it's very, very good overall.
Now we're on to Shadow Thief. Shadow Thief is one of the Silver Age Hawkman's earliest recurring villains. He was created by Gardner Fox and Joe Kubert for June-July 1961's The Brave and the Bold number 36, where he was cover featured. Karl Sands was a burglar who was caught when a policeman saw his shadow from a hiding place. In prison, Sands felt mocked by his own shadow, as it could escape his cell while he could not. Upon release, he became so obsessed with shadows that he studied them until he managed to transcend dimensions. In this other plane, Sands was given a device called a dimensionometer that allowed him to deposit his body there while operating a shadow form on Earth. The Shadow Thief used this incredible ability to keep stealing stuff until he was caught by the Hawks. He returned in 1964's Hawkman number 5 to steal more stuff and get caught again. Then he sat out a decade until returning in 1974's Justice League of America number 111 as a member of the Injustice Gang, so that he could try to steal stuff in a group and then get caught by another group of heroes. That rated a one-off appearance in 1976's Secret Society of Supervillains number 1, And then he was part of a quartet of villains in a 1977 JLA story. He got in on the Rann-Thanagar War that ran in a few 1978 issues of Showcase, then had some minor appearances in books like Crisis on Infinite Earths. Shadow Thief eventually joined up with Hyathis and some evil Thanagarians to take part in the extended Shadow War of Hawkman in 1986. And if I recall correctly, those Thanagarians were making use of the Dimensionometer technology themselves. Shadow Thief was even less impressive post-Crisis, where he was a corporate saboteur ninja who gained access to a Thanagarian Shadow Vest. The vest turned him into a quasi-shadow, and he fought the more fascistic Hawkworld troopers in a few issues. For the most part, Shadow Thief has just continued to be guy who fights Hawkman when Hawkman manages to scrounge up a title of his own. A version of Shadow Thief appeared on the 1988 CBS Superman cartoon, and another version was on a couple episodes of Justice League Unlimited around 2005, voiced by James Remar. The actual Carl Sands version had to wait until a 2008 episode of The Batman, voiced by future Batman Dietrich Bader. Batman will keep poaching from Hawkman's comparatively minuscule rogues gallery, despite the enormous wealth of his own villains, because there are no good billionaires. Despite being a remarkably simple action figure to produce, given that he's all black, only the 5-inch JLU line bothered. Plus, he's in the video game Skrulnauts Unmasked, a DC Comics adventure. October 2002's Hawkman Secret Files and Origins #1 provides our Shadow Thief profile page. It was written by Jeff Johns and James Beard, drawn by Richard Case, with colors by Tom McCraw and Digital Chameleon.
Shadow Thief. It's funny because you get so many villains, DC super villains, and there seem to be some nominative determinism. They've got the name that turns into their identity, like, Roy G. Bivolo, the Rainbow Reindeer, the Rainbow Raider. But here, you had Chronos, whose name was David Clinton, I think. And here you have the Shadow Thief, and it's just Carl Sands. I can't see it put in there. I can't see any relevance to Carl Sands being the Shadow Thief. So I just have to move away from his name and just talk about him in general. And I like him. He makes for really interesting panels when people are, using their imagination to draw him. He just appears in the side of a panel. He just comes out, the darkness stretches across the page. Even though he gets the powers is incredibly convoluted. Over the years, that thing from the initial story about the dimensionometer, which I probably mispronounced now, I imagine he would too, if used too often would cause an ice age on Earth, that was either just forgotten or dropped. So he just becomes this guy who can at will come out of the shadows, and he can make himself hard to pick things up, to rob things. But then if you're trying to shoot things at him, he's a bit more like the gentleman ghost. He's not really there. He sort of reminds me of John Tenniel type playing card figures from Alice in Wonderland, even though I went back and looked at them and they don't look like that. That's the sort of the aura he has for me. Like, it's just like a flat person with a face in a funny, strange mask. Again, when you were saying about the Atom, he's one of the Atom's big villains. Is that saying much? He's a top tier Hawkman villain, not saying a great deal, but Gardner Fox got some interesting stories about him. He's had some staying power over the years. Every time Hawkman gets revamped or the DC continuity changes, you'll get a new version of the Shadow Thief. And to me, you can't top this version. I think he's the original and best.
Shadow Thief is a weird one for me because unlike most of these Silver Age DC villains, I have a fair few resources I could have drawn from for Shadow Thief. And I decided to go ahead and do the secret files because it gave us a secret file for this episode. I'd like to try to at least get one secret file in the episodes, even these Silver Age ones. But I didn't have enough to say about Shadow Thief to go back to him over and over again. He'll be a wild card if somebody else wants to talk to him at length. I recognize him as a Hawkman villain. He was in the Joe Kubert stuff, so I read it in that trade paperback collection. He routinely shows up in Hawkman stuff, and you don't have a Shadow War of Hawkman without the Shadow Thief to help to make that happen. But I've never really read a particularly compelling Shadow Thief story. And so I just don't have a lot to say about him. I think the power is pretty cool. When they made him a ninja in the 80s, that was pretty ridiculous. But otherwise, he seems like an all right guy. He doesn't have any strikes against him. I could still see, like, he's a ruin for me. Somebody could go in there and do like a really great Shadow Thief story. And I could be like, oh yeah, that's why people should like that Shadow Thief. But I've not read that story, and I've read a lot of, not a lot, but I've still read enough Shadow Thief stories. I've got a good sense of who the guy is, and he just doesn't make a huge impression. He's kind of like a shadow, He's not fully formed in the comics for me. He doesn't really have that strong of a personality. He hasn't really done a lot of stuff that makes him exceptional amongst the supervillains. So he's just one of the guys who fights Hawkman, and that's, to me, even after all these years, that's really all he still remains to me.
Well, that's fair. He's very handy if you need, one more person for an Injustice gang. That's it.
And then the art on this one's a little wonky too. This is Richard Case, right?
I think it is, yes. It's interesting. Tell me about the wonkiness from your point of view.
The main thing is that for some reason it looks like John McCrae to me. He cheats a little bit where he'll do a character in mostly silhouette and he has his particular anatomy. And it's just like, why is John McCrae in this, Hawkman in this drawing? But it's a nighttime scene. He's being chased, just like with Chronos. He's clearly just robbed somebody of their jewels, and he's running around in his little satchel of jewels with jewels spilling out of it. It's him in his thief outfit that's mostly just like a skin-tight outfit with face peeking out. The most distinctive thing about Shadow Thief is that he's got that kind of Egyptian outline to his, I guess that's where the sands comes from, is I think maybe he's supposed to be tying into the history and everything else. But when he's not doing that, he's just a dude in a skin-tight outfit who's like a burglar. I'm not getting what's special about him from the image, even though he's done the work to do the city in the background and he's done his little bricks and stuff. But compared to the unknown guy who did Chronos, or to Sal Velluto with his shot of the city with Hawkwoman, it's a little underwhelming. So it's fine. It gets the job done. He does the thing where he takes advantage of how vertical secret files are, because you're losing a third of the page to the text. But I don't really love it. I'm not really excited by it.
I think that's fair. I mean, I wonder if he's drawn Hawkman in silhouette, because Hawkman's not the featured character. But if you don't have Hawkman in there, it's quite hard to say, what the point of the Shadow Thief is. But I actually like the sort of the fact that, it looks like he's in some kind of a tunnel, bridge, archway sort of thing. Again, I'm wondering whether there's more drawing that we haven't seen because of the way his leg extends outwards over the cover copy area. And it's funny because it looks like maybe they've got him as if he's sort of transitioning into shadow form. He's not got his normal anatomy, and he's not really got the full shadow thing going on. It just looks like he's got wonky anatomy, or that he's a stretching character. In fact, he reminds me a little here of, there was a character from Flash about 20 years ago, I think, called the Folded Man.
Yeah.
Who's got a very, very similar look. The way you're saying that you haven't read the great Shadow Thief story. I've not actually seen the great Shadow Thief image. As I say, I like the way he can generally be used as an inky presence on a page, but as one image with big impact, I've never seen it, and this isn't it. But I do quite like it. I don't know why. I think it's maybe just the use of light and dark, the way it plays on the page. I do like it more than I don't.
Well, and that interplay is part of what bugs me, because what is the light source that's casting the Hawkman shadow onto the Shadow Thief from that distance? It's nighttime. We can see the street lights are on. Why would the shadow not be cast all across the building? Why is it just right around the same place where the Shadow Thief is? The physics don't really work for me. And also, that is definitely not a U.S. city. So it's it's a whole other part of the explanation is, why are Hawkman and Shadow Thief in somewhere in Europe? Because that's not Midway City or anything.
Good point. Why is it a big MCM? What year would MCM be? I don't know. 1900. Maybe they were having a past adventure in Prague or somewhere.
Maybe Chronos time traveled them. It's all connected.
Yeah, or the building was built in 1900, but you wouldn't have it that large on the building. Sorry, I'm getting into details that perhaps aren't that important to the D.E.O. podcast. Forgive me, Frank. Now, where are we going next?
We're on to DC Comics Presents Hawkman #1. Love is in the Air by Kurt Busiek, Walter Simonson, and Bob Wiacek, with Michael Atea and John Workman. Grand Comics Database's summary reads, after a grueling Valentine's Day at the museum and fighting crime, Carter tells the tale of how he and Shayera met.
Love is in the Air. I enjoyed this one more. I mean, I was just absolutely chuffed to bits, thrilled to see old villains like the Mirror, the Matter Master, because he's just one of the stupidest looking villains in comic, and I love it. He's stupider looking than you say Chronos is, because with his mad little sort of wizard hat and the stars on it and things, and again, fun to see Shadow Thief. And they're barely in the story, because the story obviously is mostly about how Shiera and Carter met and got together. I enjoyed seeing also the biggest villain of all, Mavis Trent, but it was an all right story. It was fun. It was good. I always like seeing the people in the museum, like, Mavis and Joe, the publicity man. Didn't understand Mavis making a joke about this in Valentine display, lacking mistletoe. Yeah, it was nice to see the origin of the Hawkman and Hawkgirl romance with Shiera, she's more feisty than the Silver Age version was originally presented as. Somewhere between the Bronze Age version and the quite scary, bad-tempered post-crisis Hawkworld version. What I really thought was funny in this one was it was like almost Roy Thomas level of explaining things that don't need explaining. So you have Hawkman fighting the flying gorilla, and along the way he gets a makeshift weapon by grabbing Police Chief Andor Pull's new dangly light fitting from the Thanagorian version of IKEA, finds it to be the best weapon ever, and that inspires him to use the mace on Earth. Absolutely bonkers, but very imaginative. So well done for that, Kurt Busiek. The fact you had evolved people in there, the Hawks fighting them, was reminiscent of the original Hawkman 6 story. But overall, nice Silver Age vibe, not enough Mavis Trent. And again, it's just printed far too dark. I don't know whether it was just someone at DC whoever was overseeing production at that point, liked dark colours and thought that, it was more realistic, like not having internal thought bubbles and things. But it just should have been a bit brighter for me. But yeah, I liked it better than the first story.
Yeah, I think it's one of those deals where they were experimenting with paper stocks again, trying to get things out cheaper, and you were going back and forth between glossier and matte stocks, and I think the coloring suffered in that period. But really, I think by then it should have been resolved because it was really bad in like the late 90s. So, but I think it was a printing thing more than it was a choice. As far as the stories go, I've been enjoying our little Siskel and Ebert split decisions thing because you like one, I don't like it. I like it, you don't like it. I didn't really like this one. Kurt Busiek has written some of the best stories in comics I've ever read, but in general, he's pretty hit and miss with me. And there's just too much exposition. The Silver Age quality isn't really doing it for me. I don't think this type of material comes as naturally to Busiek as it does to some other people. I thought the reveal was dumb. I wasn't even really that big on Simonson doing Hawkman. He's not really a guy I associate with Hawkman. So I wasn't digging that, but that was a great close-up on the pigeons. Those pigeons looked rad.
I cannot deny that. Yeah, you've got to have a few good birds in Hawkman sometimes.
And then we can go on to Zatanna.
Zatanna. Well,
despite debuting in the same comic as Superman, June 1938's Action Comics #1, Giovanni John Zatara only rates a subsection on Wikipedia's list of DC Comics characters starting with the letter Z. Like most comic book characters in the early days, Zatara was heavily indebted to newspaper comic strips. In this case, Lee Falk's Mandrake the Magician. Mandrake at least started out trying to be grounded in reality, relying on stage magic tricks and high-speed hypnosis to explain his seemingly magical abilities. Once Mandrake was fighting space aliens, though, that rationalizing was increasingly pointless. On the other hand, Fred Gardner's Zatara, Master Magician, came out of the gate with full-fledged and quite ridiculous levels of true magical power. There were more slight differences at first, like Zatara being clean-shaven with brown hair and a near-nude hulking Asian assistant named Tong. Zatara pretty quickly adopted the trademark Mandrake pencil mustache from his second story, in fact, and nobody remembers Tong anymore. Zatara ran in Action Comics for 11 years, through number 132, but his proximity to one of the most popular comic book characters of all time didn't seem to rub off. He managed another couple years in World's Finest Comics, adding Batman and Robin to his publishing support system, but he was altogether gone and forgotten by 1951. Though technically an Earth 2 hero, the Justice Society of America never had anything to do with Zatara, and even Roy Thomas neglected him with passing cameos in All-Star Squadron. Without any great demand for a Zatara revival, especially against the science fantasy backdrop of the Atomic Age, we were 8 years post Barry Allen Flash before anyone made mention of the old-timer. Gardner Fox and Murphy Anderson instead created his daughter, Zatanna, for November 1964's Hawkman #4. The Hawks discovered 2 artifacts that did not belong at the Midway City Museum, split up to investigate, and eventually found 2 halves of the divided sorceress. Apparently, Zatara had gone missing years earlier, and Zatanna had taken over his stage act while struggling to develop the magical ability to locate her father. She had accidentally divided herself trying to pursue multiple leads, and it is coyly implied that she knew the Hawks' secret identities, and so used her mystical reserves to seek their help. Zatanna is arguably the first character created for a crossover stunt, and her second appearance was more or less a retcon. A woman appearing to be a classical Halloween witch confounds the dynamic duo, until it's all revealed to be a technologically manifested scheme of their foe, the Outsider, who in the end pointedly declared that there was no such thing as magic. Zatanna's more proper return, and the first one announced on a cover, was June-July 1965's The Atom number 19. Zatanna supposedly accidentally helped empower some bank robbers, and then directed the Atom to stop them, before then asking for the Tiny Titans' assistance. This time, Zatanna unambiguously knew of Ray Palmer's double life, and Ray had heard about Zatanna from the Hawks. Because nobody cares about any Zatara rogues gallery, a newly created old foe called the Druid needed to be addressed in the subatomic world of Katamor, even if her paterfamilias was in another castle. She even name-checks the heroes to host her next few appearances. As with the Druid, you would think the Warlock of Wise from January 1966's Green Lantern number 42 would become a regular in magical villainy circles, but nobody cares about building a Zatanna rogues gallery either. This was the second consecutive pairing of Gardner Fox and Gil Kane on Zatanna's Search, but Fox is on his own 9 months later in Detective Comics number 355, 14 issues after writing Zatanna's quasi-appearance there. This time, though, Fox and Carmine Infantino were there for the Elongated Man backup feature. Z had taken a darker turn after nearly 2 years, using criminals to do her bidding, and pursuing a black magic artifact needed to finally locate Zatara. She even refused Elongated Man's help, stating that where she was headed, no normal human could go. For the finale in February 1967's Justice League of America number 51, The only repeating creative to join Fox and Sikowski was inker Sid Green. It was also Zatanna's first full cover appearance, as her Atom appearance was only a floating head. All of the main superheroes that Zatanna had been in contact with, but curiously not their partners Robin or Hawkgirl, were summoned to a realm called Karma, with a KH, to help fight monsters and find Zatara. However, an evil magical being called Allura had tricked Zatanna into allowing herself to become possessed, and it was the same evil force that had cursed Zatara to withhold all contact from his daughter, lest they both be struck dead. Batman deduced that it was Zatara that was creating the impediments between himself and his kin, and that Zatanna had to be exorcised of Allura to end her curse. Finally, father and daughter were reunited. It took another year and a half for a follow-up appearance, and curiously it was Zatara guest starring in an elongated man backup. Zatanna had to wait nearly 3.5 years for her own reprise. In June 1970's The Flash number 198, where she planted a kiss on Barry Allen as part of her stage act, then borrowed the Scarlet Speedster to help her with another magical problem. This was the first non-Fox Zatanna story, by the way. Less than a year later, Mike Friedrich gave Z an encore in February 1971's Justice League number 87, where all the male heroes were horny on main for her. Z had teleported herself to the JLA satellite to celebrate the anniversary of her reunion with Zatara, oddly without Zatara, and ended up helping the team settle a dispute with the heroes of Angor, aka Avengers analogs from another dimension. Zatanna then had passing roles in 2 consecutive issues of World's Finest Comics in late 1971, one where Dr. Light drained some of her magic for his purposes, and another where she refused to help Superman cure himself of his weakness to magic. At around that same time, Zatanna started a 3-issue serial in Adventure Comics, where Zatara was the one possessed by Allura, and she had to perform the exorcism. One of her issues also featured an Animal Man strip, and she had a couple of other one-off strips besides. In 1972, Zatanna joined the Justice League's 100th issue celebration, which became a JLA-JSA team-up to locate the time-lost 7 Soldiers of Victory. That same year, Supergirl briefly spun out of Adventure Comics into her own title, and brought Zatanna along as her backup feature for much of the run. As with the prior run of solo strips, she was written here by Lynn Wein, and carried over her lone supporting character, business manager Jeff Sloan. In 1973 Supergirl number 7, the Maids of Might and Magic had a cover feature team-up, even if it took 15 pages to happen, and involved a rivalry for the affections of a man who was already spoken for. Maybe Supergirl held a grudge though, because she stopped having any backup features for the rest of that run. Another single-issue stories elsewhere, Z accidentally magicked herself into falling in love with Green Arrow when she was supposed to just borrow Black Canary's judo ability. And then there was another story where she was entertaining children at a hospital. That was about all she wrote for most of the rest of the 1970s. Our Zatanna entry comes from January 2004's JLA through Z number 3, which is unsurprisingly the last entry in that volume, Z being the Z after all. Besides the usual contributions from Mike McAviney, Tom McCraw, and Wildstorm FX, the specific drawing is by Pia Guetta and Jose Marzan Jr. We have the classic stage magician Z in top hat and tails with fishnets, looking right while holding the brim of said hat. She's sitting on a big fancy pillow in an ornate chair, one leg crossed over the other. Relatively small within the image, she's seated at center between 2 large red stage curtains. Behind her is a picture of Zatanna in her future George Perez designed superheroine costume, with a tarot-type pose with an Art Nouveau design that includes her name.
Zatanna, she was probably the 4th DC heroine I ever come across after Wonder Woman and Supergirl, and probably Black Canary, really, who I came across before Hawkgirl. Zatanna, big fan. I mean, everyone's in love with Zatanna. I think she's got the most charmingly designed superheroine costume around. I mean, who would have thought that just by putting a man's magician outfit on a woman looks so good? And now you see it everywhere. I think Paul Dini's wife, is it Mindy? I think she actually dresses in that professionally sometimes and looks fantastic. But yeah, the first time I came across Zatanna was JLA 100, when it was the search for the 7 Soldiers of Victory, and she just turned up because she'd been in an early issue that I hadn't at that point read. She turns up for the JLA's, I think it was the anniversary of the 100th meeting or something like that, pops up for a few panels, everyone fancies her. You understand why, because just as drawn by Dick Dillon and Frank McLaughlin, she looked absolutely superb. And then I read shortly afterwards, although I think they were published shortly before the jail issue, the short Zatanna serial that was in the back of Adventure Comics by, I think, Len Wein and drawn by Graham Morrow, with the most fantastically gorgeous art I'd ever seen probably to that point. It was realistic yet also exciting and dynamic. And just seeing Zatanna by herself sort of thing, really, really plucky hoe. And she was in charge. She had her manager, Jeff, at the side, but he was like, total damsel in distress figure. And she was just brilliant. And whenever she appeared, she didn't appear very often for years until she joined the JLA and then got that absolutely awful costume. But here, she's just someone I always loved. The gimmick, the backwards magic gimmick was great, because I think I seem to be able to, going by the letter column, be able to read the backwards magic a lot quicker than some of the readers didn't have any problem with it at all. And she was great. I mean, she was probably one of DC's earliest legacy characters. Is there anything not to like about Zatanna at this point?
Going back and looking at those original stories, which I was able to do because I've got the Zatanna Search trade paperback, she's so pretty. She's just, every artist was doing their best to draw her as pretty as possible. So I can absolutely see why all the guys are falling in love with her, because she's just gorgeous. You could tell the artists were taking a little extra time on her. They obviously enjoyed drawing her. At the same time, though, when you're talking about her doing the gender swap, made me think about Zatara wearing the fishnets, which gets us into like a Dr. Frankenfurter thing. So it doesn't really work as well as reverse.
Very fair. I'd like to see it.
I'm holding back on Zatanna because thankfully, since I'm doing this as an ongoing series, I don't have to do everything all at once. And this version of Zatanna, outside of reading them in back issues and in trades and stuff, just wasn't as familiar to me. This version of Zatanna was not around when I was reading comics as a kid. So I'm going to touch on that later on. I do think it's interesting that she was a much more of like an alluring hottie back then, but she's also kind of manipulative. She's definitely maneuvering these heroes around to get what she needs to get to her father. I like her more like the girl next door who happens to be able to do this extraordinary magic. I also like the backwards talking, and like you, I can read it pretty well. The only thing that gets me is sometimes the sentence structure will change from writer to writer. I like it better when it's either the words are in reverse and the letters are in reverse, whereas sometimes they'll do just the letters in reverse, but they run left or right, in normal fashion. And so getting those little nuances of how the writer is choosing to interpret that can be a little tricky, but the actual backwards words are fine with me. I can read what it says. She's like a secret decoder ring superheroine. It gives you that little extra interactivity and that little extra fun. So I appreciate that. I don't see it as work. I see it as a bonus when she's around doing her magic. But one thing that got me too in looking at those original stories is she's kind of a screw up. Like you can definitely tell that she's still learning how to be a magician. She's not as accomplished as her dad was, because she's constantly getting herself into trouble that the heroes are having to get her out of. And she really doesn't figure that much into those stories. It's mostly the heroes kind of helping to collect her and push her forward more so than she's actually pushing herself forward, it seems like sometimes.
Now, that's very fair. I mean, she was splitting herself in two and supposedly, that was rubbish retcon, supposedly turning into a witch in Batman. She was pretty much a plot device, but she obviously became popular with the readers pretty quickly because they would be throwing her into the issue of Justice League and having Superman just totally salivating over her. But it was great. I mean, have we ever actually, talking of the backwards magic, have we ever had a Bizarro Zatanna? That could be fun.
A what Zatanna?
Bizarro.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
imagine writing that.
There's a take. Yeah, they might have done that in recent years. They seem like they Bizarroed everybody a few years ago in one of those stories, but no, I haven't encountered it. That'd be kind of neat. Oh, and one thing too that's weird to me in the early Zatanna stories is there's a little bit more moral ambiguity too, because she's working with crooks multiple times and using them to help her get her ends. I thought that was interesting because I wouldn't have thought she'd had the connections for that either. So it makes you wonder where she got those connections. Maybe she's not only underworld stuff with magic, but maybe underworld stuff in general too. Maybe that's how John Constantine came into her circles.
That makes sense, actually. Yeah, it'd be funny if they ever went back to that and sort of knowing these people. I mean, suppose post 2011 sort of thing, when they had her as this strange goth girl, she probably would know then. But yeah, we need a little bit more insight into the Silver Age Zatanna there.
And what do we think of the artwork?
I seem to say this a lot, but I like it overall. I mean, I like the way the Perez outfit's depicted. I just love the sort of the bughead outfit, really, really good. But classic Top Hat Z just sitting there looking quite dull. She's a bit underwhelming. It's a pretty image, colourful, but more egregious to me is the fact that the text is wrong, because there's something in the text there saying when she's on stage, whether she's using her stage magic or her real magic, she's always impressing people. Well, as any fool knows, Zatanna didn't use real magic on stage. She liked to keep a hand in with the craft and give people a proper show that involved proper craftsmanship rather than cheat using real magic. So that was a no mark, but that's not actually the illustration. Yeah, the illustration, it's all right, but with a character like Zatanna, there's a lot of room for more than all right. It should be a lot better.
I like the concept. I think the execution is solid too. I like that they managed to work in the Bronze Age costume while showing her current and really reflective of her original costume. I like the curtains. I like that you got that stage presence and such. So all that's good. It's just, you got a Vertigo artist doing a mainstream superhero thing, and that doesn't necessarily play to their strengths. I think it's a nice piece of artwork, and I think it's really well designed.
It's quite nice. I like that the stage curtains seem to be Doctor Strange's cape.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I kind of see it now. Yeah, okay.
But yeah, it's canny. I mean, the way the tights have been drawn is pretty good. The shimmeriness was there. And, actually, yeah, I suppose if that's Zatanna at the start of her act, bit of showmanship there. It's pretty decent, but I would like less curtain, more Zatanna.
Again, it's like the Richard Case thing. There's a quality to a Vertigo artist that tells you that they don't normally draw superheroes, and it's hard to miss that here, but I think she does a good job with it.
It's not bad. I mean, I don't even know this artist at all. I'm not sure what she was drawing for Vertigo.
I think she did Y the Last Man, if I remember correctly.
Right, no, never. I tried an issue of that and didn't enjoy it.
I gave it a trade, and I didn't watch the TV show either.
Ditto.
By the way, while we're talking about daughter, how about dad? Do you have any feelings about Zatara?
To be honest, I've never seen. I mean, I've not read any of his original stories. I only ever see him when he pops up to die or to be a ghost or to be, sitting in the background while she goes off on an adventure. So I'd like to see some flashback stories of Zatara. I mean, I don't think he ever made it into a prominent appearance in the All-Star Squadron, like a Mandrake the Magician type, although I was reading that in his earliest adventures, that he was a little bit different to the classic Zatara we think of. But no, I mean, to me, Zatara is Zatanna's dad. What about yourself?
Yeah, basically the same thing. I've always found it a little sus, to be honest, because he had nothing to do with the superheroes. No All-Stars, no Justice Society, no nothing. I've always wondered about that. It's like, why does this guy not participate with any of these other guys? And they did a story in one of the secret files, appropriately enough, where he basically says, look, I do magic, I don't do superhero stuff. But if Sargon can show up to the occasional event, where's Zatara? There's something to that, I feel like.
Absolutely. Well, maybe DC, they might be listening to this and they might give us what we want. A little bit more of a Zatara focus.
So how about Gentleman Ghost? The Ghost was introduced by Robert Kanigher and Joe Kubert in an eponymous final story for October 1947's Flash Comics number 88. The same issue featured a Johnny Thunder, Black Canary team-up story, which is to say the end is nigh, as in a little over a year away. The Ghost and his gang were on a robbery spree throughout Europe, pulling off impossible heists in multiple cities far from each other near simultaneously. In America, Shayera Sanders felt compelled to address the Ghost, despite having previously demanded that Carter Hall finish his museum work before engaging in any more crime busting. Hawkgirl and Hawkman were on the case, finding considerable evidence that the Ghost was simply an ordinary man with an extraordinary array of tricks that only mimicked the supernatural. However, some elements remained inexplicable to the Hawk detectives. The editors pointedly left it up to the readers to decide. Skipping an issue, the Ghost was back to vex the Hawks and play coy with the readers as to his living situation. The following issue, the Ghost was cover featured, at least as much as invisibly aimed weapons at the Hawks allowed, as the Phantom Menace. In fact, the Ghost was the Hawks' antagonist for 5 of 6 continuous issues. Presumably feeling they'd overplayed the dead man's hand, the Ghost skipped 10 issues before his final Golden Age appearance in 1949 for the penultimate issue of Flash Comics. The Gentleman Ghost was reintroduced in the Silver Age by co-creator Robert Kanigher with Murphy Anderson for June-July 1969's The Atom and Hawkman number 43. It was here that we were finally told the outrageous origin of English highwayman Jim Craddock, who was all class while robbing you blind in 1819. Gentleman Jim had a weakness for the ladies, with the barmaid ultimately selling him out to British authorities. At the gallows, Gentleman Jim swore his accusers had not seen the last of him, and as he plunged through the trapdoor, he also was cast 15 decades forward in time. Now his fine garments, monocle, and top hat all appeared ghostly white, while the man wearing them no longer appeared at all. The looting spree commenced, once again attracting the attention of Shayera Hall, who harangued her husband into pursuing the case in a new continuity. Neither the Hawks nor the Ghost betrayed any familiarity with one another, which makes sense, given that the first set of characters were on Earth 2, while this set were on Earth 1. As with the originals, there was some question as to whether these going-ons were based in science or the supernatural, and in fact this tale was largely a retelling of the first Ghost story. The Gentleman Ghost was back the following month, where he's overjoyed to find a blind woman who can see and feel his invisible features. Jim steals a series of gems that the lady believes will restore her sight, and succeeds. However, Craddock abandons his new love until he can find a way to restore his lost form for her. We've also established a pattern in these stories where Hawkgirl accepts that Craddock really is a ghost, but Hawkman insists that there's a scientific explanation, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. Once again, the Ghost bowed out in the penultimate issue of a volume where the Hawks nested. His hiatus was only 6.5 years instead of 2 decades this time, although it was also a mere single-panel cameo in 1976's Justice League of America number 128. Randomly, The Gentleman Ghost became a Batman foil across 3 appearances in 1979, plus a small role in 1983's Detective Comics number 526. In the Para-Crisis period, Jim Craddock returned to regular appearances in Hawkman comics, beginning with the 1986 special where he took on the challenge of stealing the Earth back from a Thanagarian conspiracy as part of a shadow war. In the post-crisis years, the Gentleman Ghost is more or less the same as he ever was. His origin was expanded to being born into poverty and having his gallows fate foretold by a gypsy. It further had Jim Craddock move to America, be accused of molesting the gunfighter Cinnamon, and hung by Nighthawk. The Western heroes had been made past lives of Shayera and Carter Hall, explaining the Gentleman Ghost's specific animosity toward the Hawks. The Ghost was also the last villain fought in the only JSA volume, using new powers in the 1 year later period to allow him to raise a ghost army. True to form, the Ghost made his multimedia debut in the penultimate segment of the 1977 run of the all-new Super Friends Hour, voiced by Alan Oppenheimer. Oddly, the Hawks were not present in that episode, replaced by Superman and Wonder Woman. He retired for nearly 3 decades, then was back for 4 episodes of Justice League Unlimited, voiced by Robin Atkin Downs. He followed those up with appearances on Batman, The Brave and the Bold, DC Superhero Girls, and Batman Caped Crusader. He's also in the animated features The Lego Batman Movie and Teen Titans Go vs. Teen Titans. The Ghost has a handful of video game credits as well, but perhaps appropriately, has yet to materialize in live action. But if you must have him in material form, Mattel made a very clever 2008 action figure that incorporated translucent plastics and a hat propped up on a high collar to replicate the immaterial aspects of the villain. Just be careful though, the sticker shock on that thing may strike you dead. Our, yet again, penultimate Secret File profile page of this episode is written by Jeff Johns and James Beard for October 2002's Hawkman Secret Files and Origins number 1. The art is by Brian Talbot, with colors by Tom McCraw with Digital Chameleon. The Gentleman Ghost is holding a long, bulbous, smoking flintlock pistol up near where his head should be in his left hand. In his right is a gold-tipped cane held below his hip. Gentleman Jim is standing with his left foot perched on a stone ledge against a dark red night sky, with Big Ben silhouetted in the distance over his right shoulder. A low red moon hangs over the left.
Gentleman Ghost, I mean, he's just such a fantastically, again, well-designed figure. I mean, you see Gentleman Ghost once and I shouldn't be speaking for everybody, but for me, the first time I saw Gentleman Ghost, he just burned his way into my consciousness. I wanted to see more of him because he's just so incredibly spooky looking. He's not like your see-through person. He's just the clothes, just the monocle, and he's just moving around looking spooky. And I couldn't even tell you where I saw him, probably in that JLA comic. But by the time he started appearing and being repurposed as a bit of a regular Batman villain, I think it was Len Wein in the Bronze Age, I was always just delighted to see him because he's just got great visual and verbal swagger. I'm amazed that he's not bigger than he should be. I mean, I don't know. You've seen more of the TV versions of the heroes. Has he even been on TV?
Yeah, he was on Super Friends. He wasn't prominent. I don't know that he had more than an appearance or so. And of course, this is in the Scooby-Doo era, so there were a lot of ghostly characters running around in cartoons back then, so he didn't really necessarily stand out there. But it's weird to me because I'm definitely familiar with the Gentleman Ghost, especially in the modern age, like Hawkworld and up. I've read plenty of stuff where he shows up in that. But I could swear that I had more exposure to him as a kid. But when I went through and did the forensics on it, the autopsy of my reading, he just wasn't in any comic books that I was reading. So I don't know if he was just an archetype that I was familiar with from cartoons, or maybe the Super Friends just made more of an impression on me than I can recollect. But I feel like I know this guy better than I honestly do, especially in his original context in the Silver Age. And actually, he's a Golden Age character.
Yeah.
But until I started doing research on him, I really didn't have that much exposure to him. But I really dig the character. I think he's awesome. He's a really fun Hawkman villain. It's an opportunity to take advantage of the whole reincarnation thing, but doing it in a different way, because instead of being the one person who has different lives throughout time, he's or a person who has multiple lives throughout times. He's one person who existed in one time and continues to have that Victorian presence. Being that he was resurrected in the Silver Age, they had to come up with a pseudoscience explanation for he's not really dead. He just traversed time and dimensions, and that's why you can't see him. And it's actually a problem for him because it has trouble getting with the ladies because he's Mr. Invisible and stuff.
That was funny.
But I like him. I like that he's a gentleman. I like that he's one of those gentleman robbers, which is a great archetype in fiction. He reminds me a little bit of the Shade too, where he's a guy who sometimes helps Hawkman, sometimes is opposed to him. You don't necessarily know what his alignment is going to be at any given time. time. He's just fun. It's just the floating monocle alone is reason enough for this guy to be in existence. That is just such a great visual. And they actually managed to turn that into an action figure where they incorporate the floating hat and the monocle into it. It's like but they give him a high collar. And so they hide that the hat attaches to the collar and the monocle attaches to the hat. It's a really cool action figure. I've never seen it in the wild. I'd totally buy it if I had, but I just really applaud their ingenuity in making that happen too.
I will have to find a picture. I mean, I was just thinking about the shaders. Well, I'm trying to think whether James Robertson ever had any sort of story in which he'd had sort of them known each other. Because as you know, if two people are from the same country or even the vaguely same time period in the comic, they always knew each other or were reincarnations of Hawkman. But surely the Shade and the Gentleman Ghost had come across each other in Victorian times. Maybe someone could tell us about that, whether it happened or not.
Those are Roy's rules. I didn't make them. That Roy did.
Roy is right sometimes. Goodness me.
And then what do you think about this artwork?
Well, would the word squeezed surprise you? I mean, Brian Talbot, excellent artist. I've met him, and I'm wondering if perhaps he was given this because his book, the strip, The Adventures of Louis the Arkwright, was, I think, vaguely in the time period of the Gentleman Ghost. But I just don't like the way the clothes look so poofy. They're really zooshy. They're like they've been puffed up by air. He's got, obviously, again, he's only got 2/3 of a page to play with for the image, but he must have drawn the whole image because, I can't believe he decided to compose the image and think, well, I'll have his left leg sticking right out the image so you can't see the knee. I'll crop off his bottom foot. It's too squeezed to do any good with. I mean, I think Brian Talbot, if he'd been given his druthers, whatever druthers are, he could have drawn something a lot better. But it's too close up again or too cropped. I quite like the fact that we've got the tower clock with Big Ben in the background. I don't think we need the moon there because it makes it too crowded with the gun and the smoke. Yeah, there's just too much there. Not necessarily too much going on, but there's just too much in too small a space for me. How about yourself?
So it's funny. I always think of Brian Talbot as one of those British guys who does Vertigo stuff, who, he didn't do the superhero stuff I want to read. I have not read Luther Arkwright. I've not read Tale of One Bad Rat. So I'm like, oh, Brian Talbot, whatever, who is? He's just one of those Vertigo guys. And yet he drew one of the first Sandman stories that I read, which I loved. It was one of the ones where one of the Caesars was walking amongst the people as a leper. And I thought that was great. And I'm looking at this and I absolutely adore this image. I love it. The exact reason you hate it, I like the poofiness of it. I like how an invisible being is still really rocking this outfit. Wonderful detailing, the flintlock, so that you definitely have that period quality. Even though if the costume didn't sell it, the flintlock would. And yet again, because he's got the dangling monocle, he's a sophisticate. He's a guy who gets his white gloves dirty, apparently, but he's also a little highfalutin. I love that you've got the setting. Big Ben tells you where you are, right? Yeah, just all the fine detailing on the gloves and on the vest. And he's got kind of like a Perez quality to some of the shading he's doing with it. I love this image. It's awesome.
Frank, we're just incompatible, aren't we? But
well, we don't agree, but we disagree in very nice, pleasant, agreeable ways. It's complimentary.
Well, while I was listening intently to every word you were saying there, I did Google Brian Talbot original art Gentleman Ghost, and it seems that, yep, he did draw this as a panel. There was nothing that wasn't in there. That's exactly how he intended things to be seen. So apologies to Brian Talbot. Apologies to thinking the editor might have cropped it. I actually like it better in black and white. At some point, have a look in black and white. But yeah, I mean, everything you say is right. But, well, apart from the fact it's a bit too busy. I mean, why have we got that little tiny building or clock or something under the trigger of the flintlock button by the moon?
It looks like it's some kind of a steeple or something.
Yeah, a very strange Batman. I don't know. I mean,
he's got a clown nose on.
Absolutely, it's a skillful, stylish drawing. Let's say that, and he's given us an interesting version of one of the best villains in comics.
And see, I'm curious to see it in black and white. I like the coloring because it's that weird dark red tinge where you almost feel like you're in the early industrial environment where the environment's maybe not the best. And it helps to like contrast the whites of his costume with the darkness around him. There's silhouettes, but instead of it being a night scene, although it's night, but it's like kind of dusky. or Dawny. I don't know how you say it. I like the pop of the gold at the tip of his cane. So
That is nice.
where there is color, I think it's well used here. So I'm actually on the other side of it. I really like the coloring too.
Nah, that's fair. I do actually like his wand or stick or staff or whatever you're calling it. It's a walking cane, isn't it, of course? Stupid me.
Plus, just the fact that they made a point of having him rest his foot on that concrete piece, that stone piece, because I've seen that kind of thing when I'm in Europe. It's not something we really have here, but yeah, I can see a guy doing that, and I love that he's got the pant will wrap around the boot, which is another thing we don't really do here. And it's like, I'm sure it's from another time, and it just like gives you that one little extra fashion touch where it's like, yeah, he's not from around here. He's not from around Wynn either.
We'll return in a moment to Birdman and the Galaxy Trio. On Boomerang from Cartoon Network.
Superman joins Aquaman to bring you 60 minutes of super adventure. Special guest stars, secret messages. It's the Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure.
Carter Hall, scientific genius from a far-off world, flies into action as Hawkman, winged wonder, who would thrill his faithful fighting mascot, hit his arsenal of phenomenal powers against both earthly and interplanetary foes at peace. Hawkman, the winged avenger.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Hawk World Report. My name is Tim Board, and this is a podcast for all things Hawkman, Hawkwoman, Hawkgirl, Hawkworld. I actually set up this podcast about 7 months ago, right about the time that Venditti series ended back in November. But, things just got in the way, got too busy, and I actually kind of forgot about it, and it was a bit in the back of my mind, eventually something I wanted to do. But a couple of weeks ago, I was invited to come on a podcast called Let's Talk Podcast with Philip, and kind of reminded me that I'd set this up. If you want to find out stuff about Hawkman, I'll be trying to put this up. I don't know how often yet, maybe once a week, maybe twice a month, I don't know. We'll see how many responses I get after I put it on Twitter and Facebook and stuff. We'll try to get it going, see what happens. Who knows? It might be a regular thing. Send me a tweet, direct message, send me a post on Facebook, private message, anything, and I'll do my best to go through the list of questions and answer. I love talking about Hawkman. To me, he's the most fascinating character, and I never can get enough of him. We'll build this together and make something that's fun for all Hawk fans to come by and listen to every once in a while. Keep soaring.
Welcome back to Birdman and the Galaxy Trio.
Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go!
On the 1967 edition of Boomerang from Cartoon Network.
Through the magic alchemy of nature's most awesome sources of energy, Ray Palmer, atomic physicist, becomes the Atom, a power-packed mighty might, whose brilliant mind and great strength serve law and order against crime and injustice. Tiny Titan, scourge of evildoers, the Atom.
The first story in DC Comics presents the Atom #1, Ride a Deadly Grenade, is by Dave Gibbons, Pat Olliffe, and Joe Livesay, with Tom McCraw and Jared K. Fletcher. Grand Comics Database summarizes, while trying to stop some crooks from stealing from the time pool, the Atom gets stuck on Earth Prime. He gets home while riding a grenade thrown by Tex Ford, who provides speed and using the grenade's explosive power. The idea for his return comes from Gardner Fox and Julie Schwartz.
I like the very meta splash page, which if you squint could come from a Silver Age comic, because you'd occasionally get Stan and Jack maybe appearing in the Fantastic Four, or Robert Kanigher getting rid of the whole Wonder Woman supporting cast by locking him into a drawer because he was going to go in a different direction. Quite nice to see the writers and artists. If I'm in the right mood, don't want too many Earth One type people, I didn't mind it here. And I love that writer Dave Gibbons goes straight to the classic Atom well, and he's given Ray's girlfriend her full name, which is Lady Lawyer Jean Loring. I went down the right rabbit hole when I was looking back at this issue. I ended up buying sort of Silver Age Atom archives and rereading lots of old stories. And every few pages, Lady Lawyer Jean Loring. I just love it. So it was good to see that again. Got really nostalgic seeing the Time Pool. I've had a good few Time Pool adventures as a kid. In one of them, actually, I had to met Dick Turpin, And it turned out he was a relative of Ray. And looking it up on Wikipedia, the Highwayman did actually use the alias John Palmer. So, I mean, Gardner Fox and these writers, they were so blooming learned. I just really liked the incongruity of a super science time warp that was being accessed quite often via a fishing rod with the atom dangling down into the time pool. Really nutty, very visual, led to really interesting adventures. So it was good to see that in this story. Atom seemed to have landed on Earth Prime, so he seemed to have moved in space, not time. And so the time pool, we can say, is multifunctional. There's someone in there called Tex Ford, who's apparently a pitcher, which presumably is to do with baseball. Looked him up, couldn't find him. May have existed. You may know this, Frank. I don't. I liked seeing Gardner Fox's wife, Linda, and reading about her. It turns out that her real name was Linda Negrini. So that must have been the inspiration for Ray's longtime lab assistant, Enrichetta Negrini. I really, really enjoyed details like that. And we see that the writer had a pet minor bird named Yaki. And of course, Ray Palmer, at one point, had a bird called Major Minor. Maybe it's the Easter eggness of it all, but I enjoyed this first story quite a lot. And that's in the American sense of quite, which means a lot.
Yeah, I've watched some of those YouTube videos where like the transatlantic alterations, that something happened from here to there and there to here, whereas like these things mean the exact opposite of what they mean on the other side.
Yeah. And then once you've watched one, you get millions of them.
The algorithm definitely learns from the one time I click on those things.
I've now got to the point where I've got like an American watches an American react to British things, and it's like, for goodness sake, do your own videos at least. But they're entertaining at times.
Yeah.
But yes, it's a good story. I enjoyed it.
I will say that it was not necessarily multifunctional. It might have been dysfunctional because they did blow up the lab before he made his trip. So I think they were implying that we sent him to the wrong place because it wasn't working properly. So that's how that happened. The first thing I liked about the story was Pat Olliffe's artwork. It reminds me of his run on Untold Tales of the Spider-Man. You've got an Atom that's really physically dynamic. He's acrobatic. And then you add that with him being the visual underdog who's got personal motivations. He's sort of Marvel at DC. You know, I like it when Marvel is Marvel and DC is DC, but every now and again you want that little mix of flavors. And I do like that since the Atom in the Silver Age stories was more of a physical combatant. He was much more of a guy who could throw a punch, where a lot of the other Silver Age guys were more likely to think or use something that was less direct. That he is a little bit of Marvel-ish over at DC, while definitely still having the whole competency porn quality of a Reed Richards or a Tony Stark. So I dig that. These specials are rightly Julie heavy because this is a tribute to him after his passing. But I really enjoyed that they spent so much time on with Gardner Fox in this story. And, you know, he's a guy who was so impactful in comics, but he passed, I believe, in the 70s. So they didn't have the kind of all-star tributes back then that we would have today. So it's nice that he got some attention too, considering how important he is, especially to DC Comics. And then the thing I think that makes the story so great is that you can tell that Dave Gibbons lived through the Silver Age DC stories. I'll reference somebody else later on that I don't think did, but he's got the right story elements. He's got the nostalgia triggers. And I hear Ted Knight's voice throughout the narration, especially when they do that wind up to intoning the Atom. I can hear Ted Knight from the Filmation cartoons. So you can tell that Dave Gibbons is a fan of this material. He grew up with this material. He knows it inside and out. He knows exactly the right thing to say, the right place. So I'm right there with you. Yes, his love it makes me love the story that much more. If he's pulling a fast one on us because he knows what's going to work on us, well, it worked on me. So I'll cop to it. You got me, Dave.
I think that's right. Because when the first time I got this, I'm pretty sure that I saw the Dave Gibbons name and thought, oh, but he's not drawing it. But then again, when you read it, exactly what you said, he knows what he's doing with this story. Pat Olliffe does do a great job. I mean, it looks like he only maybe had one photo reference of Julie to draw from, so he's got the same expression in an awful lot of panels. But he does a good job with what he's got. I love the art. The art is so clean. I love the colouring effect on the time pool. I love the fact we have a totally classic shrinking Atom panel, even though the caption knocks his head off. It's just a really lovely read. It was my favourite of the 4 stories that we read in these 2 issues, this one.
Yeah, it's my favorite too, and I'm a Olliffe fan, so that didn't hurt any. So I guess we're changing it up finally. We've been doing Hawk thing, an Atom thing, a Hawk thing, an Atom thing. Now we're going to do an Animal Man thing.
Animal Man!
Animal Man was created by Dave Wood and Carmine Infantino for the September 1965 cover dated Strange Adventures number 180. I Was the Man with Animal Powers was a slightly above average one-off tale with a science fantasy anthology that only occasionally featured any continuing features. Buddy Baker was a mousy young man who crumbled like an egg whenever he tried to propose marriage to his best gal Ellen. The next day, Buddy Boy was hunting with his pal Roger. They became separated, and Buddy was exposed to a strange blinding light. Despite seeming to have been hanging on a standard American suburban porch the night before, Buddy was soon approached by a tiger and then a gorilla. Disoriented and disarmed, Buddy was saved by new powers that mimicked the animals in his vicinity. His exceedingly eventful hunting trip later involved an elephant, a sea lion, and finally a bizarre lurching orange alien with fur and scales. That night, the emboldened Buddy returned to Ellen's house to pop the big question. She enthusiastically said yes, and then the brave hero promptly fainted. Chicken man! Early response must have been good, because despite having lost his powers by the end of the first story, Buddy Baker was back in action just 4 issues later. Infantino was particularly good at handling the fair amount of action in that first appearance, but things really got wild with Gil Kane taking over the art. The yellow-skinned aliens that would eventually be credited for giving Buddy animal powers in the first place gave him a jumpstart here, but were played as rampaging aliens in this yarn, alongside a giant pink critter wreaking havoc in Buddy's small town. Another 6 months later, Buddy finally donned his recognizable orange and blue costume, but was sporting the less familiar abbreviated superhero moniker of A-Man. Carmine was back, but seemingly less enthused this time, and his take on the costume design was very quirky and awkward. A-Man started properly flying with bird powers, but otherwise felt like a weak retread of the first story. The more formal Animal-Man dipped in one more time in 1966, 5 months later, stuck with Jack Sparling on art. Buddy's costume was perhaps overly streamlined, and fought your standard gangsters like any generic superhero. Midway through 1967 came Animal Man's final Silver Age story, still by Sparling, and this was the one with the mod gorilla boss in a pinstripe black and white Beetlejuice suit. Despite every Animal Man appearance being cover featured, and Strange Adventures number 201's offering a surreal new angle, the concept just didn't catch on. Animal Man was back nearly 13 years later for a 2-issue guest run in Wonder Woman number 267 through 268 by Jerry Conway, Jose Delbo, and Vince Colletta. While reintroducing the character, I believe that it was here that we got the added wrinkle of Buddy having worked as a movie stuntman and being a Los Angeles-based hero. LA cops did not make Buddy feel welcome, so he mostly retired as Animal Man, until one of his Hollywood buddies was framed for murder. Animal Man sought to clear him by taking on the Cartel, a villainous organization that were in an ongoing conflict with the Amazing Amazon. After your typical meet-cute misunderstanding fight, the heroes team up to dismantle the cartel. Another 4 years later, Gil Kane returned to Animal Man with Marv Wolfman to form a short-lived team of neglected 60s IP called the Forgotten Heroes. Animal Man's one-time Strange Adventures co-feature, Immortal Man, had recruited him to help battle Vandal Savage. That filled 2 issues of Action Comics. Then Wolfman teamed up with Kurt Swan for another 2-parter in DC Comics Presents the following year. That featured a brief Crisis on Infinite Earths prelude, and Animal Man turned up for a bit of that maxi series. Grant Morrison and Chaz Trogue plucked the hero from obscurity to launch an Animal Man new format ongoing series in 1988. Which benefited mightily from a long run of Brian Bolland covers. Animal Man was a pioneer of throwing a jacket over a superhero costume to up their coolness factor, but also Morrison successfully branded Buddy as a metatextual must-read for the hipster crowd. By this point, Ellen had been married to Buddy long enough to have a couple of grade school-aged kids, Cliff and Maxine, and much of the book revolved around balancing superheroics with family life. Animal Man went on to become a founding member of Justice League Europe and fight against an alien invasion led by the Dominators. After a groundbreaking and highly regarded 2-year run that's still getting omnibus collections nearly 40 years on, the book was passed on to lesser hands. They increasingly distanced Animal Man from mainstream superhero comics in favor of dark fantasy in the vein of Swamp Thing, both titles converting to the mature readers only subline of Vertigo Comics at its inception in 1993. Brian Bolland outlasted every interior creator by producing covers through number 63, including an annual, and the book limped along until the 89th issue in 1995. Animal Man was reincorporated into the DC superhero universe in the late 90s, most prominently as part of a star-spanning trio traveling through the 2006 maxi series 52. There have been a few solo series revival attempts, the best received lasting a bit over 2 years as part of the new 52, but this is as far as we go. Not unlike his comic book status, Animal Man had a multimedia presence, but mostly just a blip in the grand scheme of things. Cameos in cartoons and video games, most notably being voiced by Weird Al Yankovic in 5 DC Nation shorts from 2011, which included a nifty little theme song. Our reference art for this entry was drawn by Tom Mandrake for the 31st card in the 1992 Impel DC Cosmic Card set. We see the upper body of the leather jacket period Animal Man with his arms crossed. He's surrounded and largely obscured by a variety of animals, and has a very slight smirk on an otherwise neutral face, giving overall shrug energy.
We do like Animal Man. Another complicated character who had his origin messed up with quite a bit. Again, given my age and given what you know, my experience of reading comics, it won't surprise you to learn I first came across Animal Man in that same run of adventure comics in the early 70s that was giving us new Zatanna stories. And he was reprinted in there from one of his earliest Strange Adventure story. He was okay, wasn't too exciting, but quite enjoyed it. British sense, rather enjoyed it. Was okay. Then the next time I saw him was a few years later in Wonder Woman, when he had, I think, 2 or 3 issue guest spot courtesy of Jerry Conway and Jose Delbo, and he was pretty much fun in there. Turns up again a few years later with one of the Forgotten Heroes. Didn't make a huge impression. They did have him turn up enough. It must have been an impression on Grant Morrison to pitch the DC, the miniseries that became an ongoing series, I think even before it was released, the Animal Man series, which just became one of the biggest DC Vertigo hits, you know, with all this sort of meta commentary on comics and characters coming from limbo, Animal Man realizing he's a comic character. And that's where I really, really liked Animal Man. I wasn't the biggest fan of the artist Chaz Truog, but he did a good job with the storytelling. And it's such a shame that they didn't kill the Animal Man book off after Grant Morrison left, because it just became a mess. I mean, I dropped off the Animal Man book. I recently, again, rabbit holing for this lovely podcast, so I had to look at the last sort of dozen or so issues of Animal Man, and it was just an embarrassing mess to my mind. So Animal Man peaked then for me, but I did enjoy him just generally popping up in the Bronze Age. Wasn't so keen on him in the New 52 when they brought him in all the red business into it, because I get a bit sick of, you know, DC having all these color realms and like having all the different Green Lanterns and having all the different forces. Like they get one idea and they just do it to death by just expanding it out too far. It was good. Animal Man, I like him. I'm always pleased to see him, but I think possibly I wish they used him a little less so that we can just focus on the really good adventures that he did have.
It's funny, I liked your overview because it really touches on the whole history of the character. And I come in partway through that. I got 1980s Wonder Woman number 267 out of a 3-pack. I officially marked 1982 as when I started properly collecting comic books, but I've got comics going back to the 70s. I still consider that an early exposure. And I thought he had a nice costume. I liked the orange. I thought the orange and blue was an interesting mix of colors that I didn't see that often. He had an interesting power set. That was a fun run of Wonder Woman comics too. I only had the one issue. It was out of a 3-pack. I didn't have access to anything more than that. And so I really didn't see him again until, I guess I should say, Proto-Vertigo series started. Around 89 or so, 88, 89, I saw it at the bookstore I was going to, Marauder Books. But it was already a little ways in, if I recall correctly. And it was, I think, a $1.75 book or $1.50. And that was a lot of money for me back then. So I just didn't make the leap over there. But I did start, going into the 90s, I started picking up his back issues here and there. I particularly loved issue number 9 because you had some great Tom Grummett artwork. And, you know, my boy Martian Manhunter was in that one, so that didn't hurt any. When the book was coming out, the only time I bought it on purpose as it was coming out was that Jamie Delano and Steve Pugh had a run, and I was like big Steve Pugh. I'm a lifelong Steve Pugh fan. From when I first saw him, I've loved his stuff. I didn't stick with it because I didn't feel like the horror stuff they were doing there necessarily fit that character. What Morrison did was what you needed to do with that character, but most people aren't Morrison and can't do the kind of things that Morrison did. I did check out in the New 52 the first trade that Jeff Lemire and Travis Foreman did. And again, it was a good looking book, but I thought it went too far into the horror for a character that I think really works better in that quirky space where he's weird, but not necessarily, you know, grim. I think the whole point of the first story arc or the extended arc of Grant Morrison's run was that this isn't a character that you do grimdark stuff with. And then they immediately enter a cycle of grimdark that seems to be endless with the character. So that's unfortunate. But yeah, absolutely. I think most people agree that, you know, it's Morrison or bust. And while I like the earlier version of the character that I saw in Wonder Woman, clearly the best thing you can do with them is whatever the kind of stuff Morrison wanted to do with them. And it's a shame that not everybody can do that kind of thing.
Yeah, did you read, so just after, I think it was shortly after the New 52 series ended, did you read the Jerry Conway, Chris Batista Last Days of Animal Man miniseries? I think it was 6 issues.
No, but tell me more.
Very good. It was just like an Animal Man adventure, sort of, you know. It wasn't Jerry Conway trying to imitate Grant Morrison, but it was very much in that sensibility of, you know, Animal Man just, you know, trying to get his life back on track, and the family were in there, and it wasn't too weird. The art was lovely and clean. Got Brian Bolland back on covers. In fact, I think one of the issues has a cover that's Brian Bolland doing a different take on Animal Man #1 from the Grant Morrison, Chaz Truog era. And I really enjoyed it. I would say, you know, it's probably on the DC app. I'd say when you get a chance, dig in, let me know what you think, because I really, really enjoyed it.
And I have to say, too, Boland has had a number of runs on covers, and I'm not sure that he's ever had as great of a run, and certainly probably not as long of a run as he had on Animal Man. Those were some fantastic pieces of artwork.
Yeah, he did about 34 issues or something like that.
No, a lot longer than that, because he was still doing covers during that Pew run that I was doing in the 50s. So yeah, he stuck around until almost the end of the series. I think the last year or so, he finally dropped out, but he stuck around for a long time.
Oh, must have been a big fan.
Yeah. But speaking of artwork, how about the Tom Mandrake piece we've got here?
Oh, not my favourite. Yes, Animal Man seems quite sensible to surround him with animals, but there are too many animals. There's not enough Animal Man in the picture. I like Tom Mandrake as an artist, but to me, Tom Mandrake is great when he's drawing something, I don't know, in the the DC Waid books or Swamp Thing. He did some nice Batman work, but I don't like him on a superhero who I think should be drawn pretty cleanly like Animal Man. And I wonder whether it's actually the printing, because it just looks quite rough. It's just mucky line work. Or maybe it's just that his work doesn't match Animal Man. But I don't like it very much. And I don't like the fact that, again, this isn't to do with the visual, but on the card, they've got something in there that's not right when they mention how he uses his powers, when this card came out a couple of years after the morphic field business had been introduced into the comics. And we know that Animal Man didn't have to be near animals to tap into them. So lose points for that. But yeah, the Tom Mandrake, I mean, given the way this podcast's gone, you would have loved this, because I didn't love it.
Right. So I'm ambivalent in this instance. I'm not a huge fan. I've got a set of DC Cosmic cards. I'm not as huge a fan of that series, in part because the borders are just so hideous with that gray. But also, some of the artwork feels like it was drawn smaller than a trading card and blown up to trading card size. There's just a lot of pieces of artwork that are underwhelming in that set, I find. And this feels like the opposite. This feels like maybe this was a pinup intended for one of the issues of the comic book that they shrank down, because it's so detailed in such a way that you would not put this much effort into a stinking trading card. And blowing it up a bit for the presentation for the podcast Tumblr feed and everything, you see more detail the bigger you get the piece. So it's like, I don't think this was supposed to be a trading card. And so it's a lot more involved. I guess there's that Vertigo quality where, they want to underplay the superhero aspects, so they want to surround him with the animals. But because I don't think Tom Mandrake is a guy I'd really want to see drawing Animal Man, I actually am glad that he's drawing a bunch of other animals instead, because he draws them pretty well. And the fact that there's so many of them kind of works, because there's no way he's existing in the same spaces on those animals. So it almost references the morphogenic field, where you know that he's somehow connected to these animals without inhabiting the same space. So I think it illustrates the morphogenic field well. Maybe that was the intention. Maybe they were going to do like a who's who page on that, and they ended up converting it into a trading card or something instead. But I like the level of detailing, and given that I don't think I'd wanted to see Tom Mandrake draw superhero Animal Man, this is a good compromise for me to get an artist I like doing work that I like in a place that I wouldn't expect or necessarily want him to be in.
That's a fair point. I mean, that is a magnificent elephant. I mean, those eyes the eye is absolutely lovely. What's weird, looking at the other, I mean, I know again it's not really our remit, but looking at the other side of this trading card, that headshot, I mean, that doesn't look like him at all. It looks like could be 70s Barry Allen, 70s Aquaman, 70s Captain America. Could be Ralph Dibny looking. It just doesn't look like Buddy Baker at all in any version.
Well, and not just that, there's no way that's Tom Mandrake artwork either, which also makes me think that maybe this was repurposed artwork. That was another thing that was weird about Cosmic cards, was that you have no credits for these guys doing the backs, and I don't know who did this. Maybe it was the same guy who did all of them. I have to sit there and like look at the style to see if I could, but I don't know, just looking at this image, I don't know who it is, but it feels like this is the pre-crisis on one side of the card and Vertigo on the other side of the card. These guys are not matching up well at all.
Yeah, it's like Rich Buckler, Johnny Storm or something. I don't know.
We're doing a lot of Silver Age stuff. We're having to find some people within that time period to feature. So we basically Hawkman, Animal Man. So why not Deadman too? Well, I know it's really out of left field given the context, but at least it contrasts. Animal Man feels like maybe more the Hawkman sphere. I can't honestly say that Deadman is in the Atom sphere, but they are both very acrobatic, visually dynamic characters. So that's what I'm going to try to play at. Deadman debuted in the October 1967 dated Strange Adventures number 205. just a few months after Animal Man's last appearance there, and also co-created by Carmine Infantino. Arnold Drake joined him in introducing Boston Brand, a circus trapeze artist with the gimmick of wearing a macabre red costume and ghostly white mask. The performer advertises Deadman became an actual corpse when an assassin's bullet laid him extra low. Brand's restless spirit continued to wear the Deadman colors as he tried to solve the mystery of his own murder. As an added complication, he was compelled by the East Indian goddess Ramakrishna to go on a great many side quests, and being a ghost, the only way he could interact with the material plane was by temporarily possessing the body of a living host. Strange Adventures had either more confidence or more desperation when it came to Deadman, offering him as the cover-featured star of 12 bi-monthly issues through 216 near the end of 1968. It couldn't have hurt that Neil Adams took over the art early on, usually working from Infantino plots and Jack Miller scripts. When that title switched to all reprints, Neil Adams carried the feature to a Batman team-up in Brave and the Bold number 86, and a 3-issue stint as a backup in Aquaman. From there came guest appearances in Justice League of America, Jack Kirby's Forever People, and elsewhere. Deadman was briefly a partner to the Phantom Stranger, and more or less an honorary member of the Challengers of the Unknown in the late 70s, before an 8-issue stint as a feature in Adventure Comics. Guest appearances continued into the next decade, including a 1986 4-issue miniseries by Andrew Helfer and Jose Luis Garcia-Lopez. Deadman was also one of the first rotating features when Action Comics became a weekly anthology in 1988. This was important because Mike Baron and Kelly Jones eventually took over that strip, turning Deadman into a more skeletal and ghastly figure. Their approach briefly revitalized the character, giving him a second prestige format miniseries in 1988. From then on, Deadman became a staple of pretty much any major gathering of magical or horror heroes within the DC universe. More miniseries and featured runs have come and gone, as well as various reprint editions. Deadman's last major play in the pre-Flashpoint period was a leading role in the 2010 bi-weekly maxi series Brightest Day, where Boston Brand was briefly restored to life in segments usually rendered by Jeff Johns and Yvonne Race. Though it's past our purview, I'll note that in the New 52 era, he was a founding and long-standing member of Justice League Dark, joining the team's many appearances at the time. Like the Middlemen, Deadman has had a ton of potentially high-profile near misses as a television show or movie involving major talents. Like Animal Man, he's instead mostly settled for cameos in animation and in video games, including DC Nation's short of his own. His first realized cartoon appearance was on a 2006 episode of Justice League Unlimited, and his most famous voice actor to date has been former teen Lex Luthor Michael Rosenbaum. Our final secret file is an actual profile page from November 1999's Day of Judgment Secret Files number 1. It was written by Scott Beatty, with art by Anthony Williams, and colors by Tom McCraw with Digital Chameleon. Deadman lands between the extremes of the well-built, handsome Neil Adams model and the more ghoulish Kelly Jones take. His full figure is shown from a downward perspective, fingers, arms, and legs spread apart, and again, downward. He's looking at the viewer by facing right, partially obscured by his very high collar. He's standing in a gray space that is swimming with the yellow outlines of countless deformed spectral monstrosities.
My exposure to Deadman originally was pretty much the same like every 6th issue of Brave and the Bold, because you know the way Bob Haney just used to have the same people again and again: Joker, Mr. Miracle, Green Arrow, Wildcat, Plastic Man. Deadman was definitely in the rotation. But whereas I would get bored with some of the other characters, I was absolutely thrilled whenever Deadman would appear, because, again, that's got to be one of the all-time great superhero looks. Because we know it's not it is a costume, but it's a ghost. It's a ghost as well as a costume. Ectoplasm, I don't know. But he's so striking, and he's got this wonderful Ben Grimm type way of talking. Fantastic power that, obviously didn't anticipate Quantum Leap. Quantum Leap ripped it off or just came up with the same idea many years later. But going into people's bodies and taking things over gave us just some amazing stories. So I really, really enjoyed him. Loved the miniseries that came along years later, which I think was Andy Helfer and JL García-López. It was excellent stuff, and loved the collections. I say a couple of years ago. I look back to my reviews. It was about 10 years ago. I don't know whether you ever saw the Deadman graphic novel type series. I think it's 3 issues. Dark Mansion and Forbidden Love.
Yeah, that's Doug Monk and Kelly Jones, right?
No. It was a novelist lady whose name I can't remember at the moment. And
so who drew it?
And let me see, 10, Dark Mansion or Forbidden Love. It was
Dark Mansion and Forbidden Love. Okay.
Yeah. It was absolutely gorgeous book, but it didn't get much sort of publicity at all. Because it's basically dark, Deadman stumbles across one of these dark mansions, and there's a woman in there having sort of spooky problems, and it's just fantastic. Yeah, it's written by Sarah Vaughan, again, an author I don't know, but I know the actor. I know there was a singer, but not her, and drawn by Lan Medina, and covers by an artist again whose name isn't here, but I don't know who it is. But it's just, honestly, dig it out. I don't know whether it's on the DC app, but it's coloured by Jose Villarrubia. Absolutely sumptuous, on glossy artwork, glossy paper, looks great. Deadman's on brilliant form in there. Really, really nice, powerful story. One of the main characters is a trans person and just treated really respectfully and intelligently, which is just really nice to see. I'd recommend it to anybody if they like gothic romance, if they like Deadman, if they like a darn good comic reading. Seek out Deadman, Dark Mansion, and Forbidden Love, because it's not one of those stories where a classic DC character has been inserted for the sake of name value and to get people to read it. Deadman is totally Deadman in there. He's on great form. It's one of the best Deadman stories I've ever read.
Awesome. No, yeah, completely flew under my radar. I assume that's in recent years.
About 10 years ago.
So for me, Deadman was an intriguing idea that I was very elusive. Like, I would see him featured in Challenges of the Unknown house ads back in the day. The only issue of Who's Who Ever Bought, Volume 6, featured him, I think drawn by Jose Luis García-López. In 88, a friend of mine got a grocery sack of comics, and among those books were the first issue of the miniseries. I'd see him in Books of Magic and just everywhere. I briefly collected Action Comics Weekly when Dan Jurgens was drawing him, and that was not the person to draw that character. It's a great visual. But every time I was exposed to him, it's weird because he's everyman kind of dude. Like, he talks like kind of coarse. He doesn't really have the mystique as a person. He's got the acrobatics, which is cool. And obviously he's got the ghost powers as an undead person. But his stories don't really feel compelling to me. And I went back and I looked at the old stuff from the 60s, and it's clear they're doing The Fugitive essentially, but with the body hopping quantum leap aspect to it. And so I love the visual, or I have loved the visual in the past, but every time I tried the character, he just never got traction with me until I just sort of lost interest. And so that's kind of where I'm at now with Deadman. So maybe Dark Mansion and Forbidden Love would be the thing that would turn me around. But even going through Brightest Day, where he was one of the main characters, he's drawn by Ivan Reis. Yeah. I understand what they were doing with that story, but it just didn't do anything for me. Like, it didn't make me stand him or anything, So it's like, I've always wanted to like Deadman, and it's never really happened.
Well, all three issues are on the DC app, so when you get a chance, dive in, because you'll know pretty quickly whether it's your bag. So you won't necessarily have to read all three issues to find out that out, but give it a go sometime.
And what do you think about the artwork here?
Well, I'm glad you've explained what the background's all about, because my eyes didn't quite notice it. I just thought it was a patterned brown carpet. I don't quite like the partly obscured head, but as you've realised by now, I like a clean-cut version of everything, which is weird because I didn't enjoy the way the Marvel Handbook handled heroes. But no, I like the angle on Deadman. I love the highlights on the costume. The face looks great. I don't like skeletal Kelly Jones Deadman at all. It's a clever idea. Don't like it. Different version of Deadman to my mind. No, it's a pretty cracking image overall. Really, really, really fun. I like it. How about yourself?
I'm with you. I really respect what Kelly Jones did in the 90s, and definitely I think he turned people on to Deadman in a way that they hadn't been previously. But also, part of what makes the vision so striking is he's dead. He looks so virile. He looks like a superhero, but he's a ghost. And so when you make him look like a zombie, desiccated mummy thing, whatever way he was going for there, I respect what he's doing, but I don't think it plays to the strengths of the original design. So it just feels like a corruption of the design, right?
Definitely. So, I say, if we were told this was, a new continuity Deadman or the Deadman in Another World, fine. We've been following Deadman for decades at this point, and that's not how he looks.
So this is an interesting half point where he's definitely sinewy. He looks like he's not ingested a fat or a carbohydrate in his entire adult life, but he's still not quite emaciated. He's still muscular. He's still, if I were in this shape, I'd be a happy camper.
Oh, yes.
But he's got an undead quality to him that recalls Kelly Jones, and he has elongated features. His limbs seem to go further from him than they're supposed to, and there's a real disparity from one leg to the other leg, so he's probably not in a physical space. It's probably a metaphysical space. I'd really respect the angle of the camera. I think it's interesting to come looking down at an angle in that way. And I imagine that was hard to render and make it look right. And I think it's distorted, but it's distorted in a way where I think that was the artistic intent rather than any deficiency. I like the monochromatic phantasmagoria going on around him. It adds a lot of detail, but he's not buried in detail like some of the other pieces we talked about because the coloring makes him pop and because his body, while definitely well contoured and delineated, it's just drawn in a different way where the monsters that are around him are all squiggly. And so the differences in the styles make it clear that they're not overlapping with one another. And he's just cleaner and more fully embodied, more fully realized, where the demons, you can't even necessarily tell where one starts and another ends. And some of the things are just like weird shapes or mouths. You're not overwhelmed with detail. So you can just respect how much work went into this, how much effort went into this. And they had to do that as a whole besides. I like this one. I think it's a really good use of the Secret Files format because, again, it's very vertical and they're able to take advantage of that and use it to their benefit rather than it being a hindrance.
Possibly my favourite of the whole run of pictures we've been looking at. And I particularly like the way he seems to be playing piano with his hands in the air.
Right. And again, his hands are a little too big. They're a little too skinny, but in a way to where it just lets you know that this guy's not whole. It works for the Deadman character in this interpretation.
It does indeed, yeah. It almost looks like this is as if there's like a shadow of someone across his crotch and lower belly. I don't know, it's just shading from somewhere.
Yeah, especially because you've got that shading on the belt as well, or what appears to be the line of the tights, whatever it's supposed to be. So, yeah.
Obscuring the D.
Yeah, so that is a little odd because I'm not sure, again, what that would be, but I don't mind it. It doesn't detract majorly from the rest of the image for me.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. Absolutely.
Our final story from DC Comics Presents The Atom #1 is also titled Ride a Deadly Grenade, but this time it's by Mark Waid, Dan Jurgens, and John Bogdanove, with Tom Smith and Rob Lee. As succinctly as ever, Grand Comics Database summarizes, a string of crimes in Ivy Town by the Broom Mob are the result of an enthusiastic science fiction editor who spends tales at a local diner.
I mean, this second Atom story is such a lot of fun. Again, an older looking version of Julie Schwartz in this one. And I really enjoy the splash page where Julie's shouting, "Atom, you must take this tie pin. My life depends upon it." And that probably took you also straight back to that famous Julie Schwartz Flash cover 163, in which I think the Flash is saying something like, "Reader, you have to buy this book. My life depends upon it." That has to be a real nod, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, and again, it's the Flash guy writing it too. So I'm pretty sure he was aware.
Yeah. So in this story, it's quite fun. The idea about Julius Schwartz's ideas again. Actually, no, that's a different story. That's the story about with the bean soup. Oh, this is the story with the bean soup. But yeah, it's a fun Atom tale. It's fun the way that they work Julius Schwartz into it. People are busy listening to Julius Schwartz come out with his ideas because of all his originality. They're using his original ideas to do crimes. Julius Schwartz just sitting in this diner, and I don't know whether it's like his attempt to flirt, but the caption says, "Without turning off the charm, the gruff man flirts effortlessly with the waitress." And he says, "How about a little more bean soup?" And she says, "You got it, tee-hee." It's great though, because the waitress then tells Ray Palmer that he comes in every day for lunch, works at a science fiction publisher, comes out with his ideas, and I just think they've come up with a really, really clever way to work Julie and his ideas into the story. Getting examples of the way Julie's ideas have come up with stories for the Flash and the Batman with covers that we have seen. It's just very, very, very clever stuff. The idea that he was called B.O. Schwartz, B. Original Schwartz, which I would have thought otherwise, body order Schwartz, which is very, very good.
He obviously did a rebranding from his teenage years.
That makes a lot of sense. And I love the idea that there's a pseudonym, Ed's Notes, because, read Julius Schwartz story and you're constantly getting the editor's notes, Ed Notes. But one thing that did surprise me is that Mark Waid's got the Atom punching Chronos, and we're told that it's an atomic punch. As far as I know, the atomic punch was only ever the original Atom, Al Pratt's thing, or am I wrong there?
No, I don't think you're wrong. So this is my thing. This is a great contrast to the Dave Gibbons story because I know Mark Waid loves the Silver Age, but I really don't feel like he was there the first time. I feel like he's a Bronze Age kid who got some back issues. And he's also always had that vibe where he was probably a Justice League guy who just kind of dipped into the solo titles every now and again. Like, yeah, I know he loves his Superman, but I know this dude was not reading no Wonder Woman. I don't think he was reading any Atom comic books. And so it works okay when he's doing DC Universe stuff or Justice League stuff, but then when he has to zero in on a guy like the Atom, you can kind of tell that he's faking it a little bit. Like he's great doing the Julie Schwartz stories, but I feel like it's him doing other people's stories that he was told when he came in as an editor. because I think he came in a little after Julie had left his editorial position. And so I think everybody was telling him all the great Julie stories. And I think we're getting that version of Julie, the second-hand version, as opposed to the first-hand. And he does a great job. He has a lot of the key points that you got. But I really feel like somebody told him those stories instead of you experienced with it firsthand. And again, he definitely didn't know what line that Julie used on the waitress, because give me some more pea soup wasn't hit. I don't care how the intonation was. I don't think you're getting that reaction, like you said.
Absolutely. And I think being super peas in one of the other stories as well, from one of the other books, which is interesting. And one thing I do like about this is that I think Pat Olliffe did a decent job with Julie Schwartz, but as I say, I think he was going from reference. But Julie Schwartz, you can tell with Dan Jurgens drawing him. I think Dan Jurgens came into comics just at the end of Julie's, like last few years of Julie Schwartz. So I think he would have known him. And I think Julie Schwartz still came into the office quite a lot. I think maybe once a week to train the new editors and writers and things. But he's obviously very familiar with how Julie Schwartz looked in real life. And so we get some great angles on Julie Schwartz, great expressions. And we also get some nice Gil Kane homages, or, perhaps even straightforward, fair enough, fair play steals in here, because there's some really, really nice feeling of original Gil Kane in here, like close-ups on Ray Palmer and things, and the angles on the Atom, the angle on Chronos from below. I really like it. It's quite unusual. I don't think I've ever seen John Bogdanove ink anything, and they work really, really well together. Tom Smith's colours look good too. Usual note, bit dark. Blame the paper, blame the production, I don't know. But not my favourite of the 4 stories, but I like this a lot.
Yeah, I'm a John Bogdanove fan, and I've definitely seen him ink himself, but I don't recall seeing him ink other people. And of course, he's noted as being a mimic. He did those covers during 0 Hour where there was a multiverse of different versions of Superman and Batman on the covers or the posters in different styles. Yeah, those are cool. And so I can tell that he's clearly making a point of imposing Silver Age styles onto Dan Jurgens' artwork. And when he's doing like that Murphy Anderson feathering, it looks really good on Dan Jurgens. And then the Gil Kane doesn't fit as well, and the Carmine Infantino really doesn't sit well. So sometimes he's taking me out of the story because I'm looking at a panel that's a Carmine panel in terms of how he's interpreting it. But I just saw another guy's interpretation a few panels before, and I'm spending a lot of time pegging, okay, is this a Jokiella? It's like I'm seeing who he's referencing instead of keeping up with the story. But I'm not a big Dan Jurgens guy. I've liked him at times. I know what I'm going to get with Dan Jurgens pretty much every time. So seeing him inked by Bogdanove and giving that a different take, I like it. Like, for some reason, his Atom is much beefier here than he is in any other place I've seen Jurgens draw the Atom. I don't know if that's just him taking a stylistic leap or if Bogdanove has something to do with that. But it's interesting seeing this big, bulky, beefy, almost like Ed McGuinness-y Atom, even though it doesn't necessarily work, but it's different. It's an interesting. I kind of dig that. Like you said, the Julie in this one is great. And it's an older Julie. He's not trying to do, maybe the period was part of the problem too. But yeah, Jurgens was around at least in the early 80s because he did one of the early Killer Croc appearances in Batman. He was doing Warlord. So he was around when Julie was still at a proper editorial position. He did work at a time where you still had to go into the offices in New York. So he would have had opportunities to see him. And you can definitely see he knows his way around drawing Julie. So that works great. And again, those little touches like Superman tie pin, his body language and his attitude. This is the most Julie I've seen in any of these stories so far. So I'm curious to see if anybody else is going to be able to match this. It may be printing the myth, but the version of Julie that I know from other people's recollections is very much present here. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's really, really great. Really nice. And thinking on, didn't Dan Jurgens put the Atom into his version of the Teen Titans?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think so he obviously liked it. I think that's right for reappraisal. But yeah, Dan Jurgens, I do enjoy his art, and I enjoy his writing. Sorry, another little aside, but have you read the 2 miniseries, the First Night?
No, I have not.
Batman. Absolutely superb, and the art by Mike, forgotten his name, really, really good.
Yeah, I definitely. So here's the thing, Jurgens. I'm really not big Jurgens guy, except that sometimes he's a good writer. I thought he did some interesting stuff with Thor, and randomly some of his Tomb Raider stuff was kind of good. So I'm more amenable to him as a writer sometimes. Recall liking the artwork that I saw from that, but I haven't investigated any further.
Yeah, well, honestly, it did. Again, it should be on the DC app. Batman First Night. It's really, excellent. It's just it probably is an Elseworld sort of thing with black layer, but it's great. Yeah, Jurgens, Mike Perkins drawing it and Mike Spicer colouring, but just the quality of the artwork alone. But the real, if Dan Jurgens writes it, is sort of very much as if Batman was appearing in a very, very hard-boiled, when just coming out of the Depression America, and the way the characters talk, they talk like they come out of gangster films, and Julie Madison's in there with a big part. It's really good fun. Give it a go.
Cool. Yeah, no, I'll at least give it a toss. I like Bergen's artwork. I just haven't gotten there yet. Oh, and by the way, I liked when the creative team got themselves into that one panel too. I know you were just talking about how you're not really a huge fan of these self-inserts that they had, especially in the Bronze Age. But I guess if they're going to do a story about Julie, they can go ahead and get themselves into the story and share some space with Julie. That's nice too.
That's fine. You have them ordering bean soup, fine. It's just when they become the supervillain of the issue, not so much.
Right. The stuff with Carrie Bates as a villain in the Justice League, and I think Lynn Wein was a villain too, or was it just Bates?
Did Elliot Maggin save the day in that one?
All that's bad. All that's fan fiction that managed to get published into the mainstream. I'm 100% with you on that. That was goofy.
Yeah. And every time they turned up at the Halloween parade, I cringed.
This has been Birdman and the Galaxy-3 on Boomerang from Cartoon Network.
Okay, so now we can talk about our favorite files.
Well. The Hawkman, despite the fact I like more wings, coloring's great, the overall image is really, really, really great. I love the swoopingness of the Hawkgirl image. I mean, you mentioned that, the perspective, the fact the Earth looks round because she's just flying in that manner. That looks great. Atom, not my favorite, but yeah, I think the Hawks and Deadman would be my favorites.
I really did like that Hawkgirl, and so she's definitely on my list. I love that Gentleman Ghost, though, so that was easily my favorite of the lot. And I also really like the Deadman, so those are my top three for sure. We had a nice variety too. No, not really, because we were on the same page for Hawkgirl and Deadman. So the only split was you ended up fighting Hawkman, I ended up fighting Gentleman Ghost. So we clearly have some areas of agreement.
Absolutely, of course we do, Frank.
Now,
very congenial.
I've spent so much time on the run that I haven't had much chance to attempt any sort of investigation. Still, this trip had made something clear. I initially expected that Shag had fallen victim to a corrupt government agenda, because everything right now, unfortunately, the international scope and rapid, competent pursuit of myself to Scotland is far beyond this administration's abilities. What we have here is a well-organized and funded operation, whose agents hadn't slipped up yet. I didn't have much of a chance to scope out those specialist crime division officers that I knocked out in the underground, but none had any distinguishing marks visible, and their credentials seemed to be in order. I have no reason to think that Special Branch won't be bringing in MI5 to continue pursuing me. Thankfully, Martin is providing me access to my confidential communiques and a way off the island.
I probably only looked in my own email.
Well, if nothing else, it's in the Google Doc.
I'm on the Google Doc. No, I'm on the telephone version. I can send it to you. I've got it as a file. So I couldn't find an email address for you. Lots of homework there.
I'm really terrible about keeping up with iTunes reviews and things like that. So while I was thinking about it, I want to go ahead and hit that section. Captain Entropy left a 5-star review. For eloquent insights and challenging opinions, call Frank. This may be my favorite of Diablo Frank's podcasts, and not just because he's had me on this one. This is Frank and a guest discussing characters and comics you love. He's famous for hot takes because he thinks deeply about the material. It's tough to match his insights or his production value. I predict you will greatly enjoy these conversations and wish you'd been in on them. That's my usual reaction. Right On Network gave 5 stars and wrote, fantastic show. While I was listening to the show while packing and moving, I was entertained and educated about the Golden Age heroes. Diablo Frank packs the podcast with a knowledge and energy that is modern, yet engenders a stench of nostalgia that makes me want to dig back in the long box. If you are reading the books covered by this podcast, it is darn near a required listen, I would say.
I did look up the origin of Jodhpur flares, but we don't need to go into that.
Which one now?
Why Jodhpurs have flares at the top.
Oh, no, actually, please share that with me right quick if you know about that. I was curious also.
Apparently it's to do with, in the olden days, they didn't have stretched fabrics for trousers. So when people who weren't cowboys in denim, when they were trying to get onto horses, the trousers would often rip. So they were just basically building a lot more material so they could move their legs slightly within the trousers and move the trousers when they were getting on and off the horses and things.
So it's just there for slack then. That's interesting. I never would have thought of that.
Just a bit of slack, yeah. Yeah, and I don't know why the old superhero has them, because I quite like the look, actually, quite cool.
It's just like the superfluous fin that someone like an Adam Strange has. It's just like a cool little affectation in modern times. I don't know if it ever served any, real purpose. I don't think that flying around on a jetpack, that the fin's going to make that much of a difference. But, it's kind of his thing. So, yeah, Yodfer, your period, like 30s hero, your Doc Savage or whatever. Yeah, it gives you a little extra flair. Literally, flared out on the sides.
Yeah. You're saying Yodper. That sounds quite Germanic. Is that how it's pronounced over there?
Trust me, nobody in the States is saying that word anymore and haven't for quite some time. But my recollection is that from watching old movies and stuff that they were Yodpers.
Jodpers.
But that...
All right.
Jodpers.
Yeah.
I've never ever heard of anything but Jodpers. I don't know how the Indians pronounce it, because it's probably a place in India, isn't it, or something? A Raj thing.
Jodhpur.
Oh, yeah, that would make sense too. With the spelling and everything. I never gave it enough thought to even get that far into it.
Yeah, anyway, sorry. Get your show on the road, I'm sorry.
42 Creature Lane, A World on Fire, JSA All-Star Squadron Earth 2 podcast, Abel Muftik, Alexander M. Osias, who commented on Volume 9, Silver Age Secret Files and Origins. Exciting stuff. I have to find the actual pages you're talking about. Alan Boyce Jr., Dr. Ange, The Bat Pod, Between the Pages blog, Billy D., Billy Hines, comics enabler and victim, who re-skeeted. Me and Frank talk deep cut Wildstorm books. And we may tangent a little, but that's on me. Comic Foil skeeted. Looking forward to hearing what you sound like, Billy. Queuing it up for my 6-hour drive tomorrow. Dave's Comic Heroes blog. Doc Strange, who skeeted. The first pick looks like Vin Diesel. You're not wrong. Dr. Pop Culture. Doug Adamson wrote of Volume 11, Team 1. Well done. I didn't even know you were in my city. I shall have to check my security team again. More to the point, this episode was enlightening because other than a couple of pre-Ellis Stormwatch and then Ellis Stormwatch Authority run by Miller, I have next to no idea about Wildstorm. And it's now clear I was right to avoid most of it. What a mess you and Billy had to navigate. It is the perfect example of, I tried it and now you don't have to. Thank you for taking the hit for the rest of us. I think the idea of Wildstorm fitting in the gap between JSA and JLA eras makes sense. Shame that DC had such a mess to work with. What I did think was missed out was Planetary, which was sort of in Wildstorm, but also was its own thing, and it should have been the Gap Year's tale in my opinion. And yeah, you're right, it's weird because, as far as I know, it's technically owned by DC Comics via Wildstorm, but it also seemed like maybe Ellis and John Cassidy had some sort of participation in that, because they never really integrated the Planetary characters that much in stuff. They toyed with it a little bit in one of the recent DC titles, I don't remember which one, but not really. And then also, my own personal experience with Planetary is somewhat limited. I read some of the early issues. Another one of those situations where I was a retailer, had strip covers, it gave me some access. But my personal exposure was fairly limited, fairly early on. And also, the Planetary characters don't really turn up, to my recollection, in the various Wildstorm source books. So it'd be a bigger reach than normal even for me to get to those characters. But we may get around to it, especially if I get around to reading more of that stuff at some point. I honestly have stuff that I'm prioritizing more since even though they look backwards, most of the Planetary story is set in the 2000s. And a lot of their flashing back goes back to before the Golden Age heroes into the Silent Age or whatever you want to call that. So I just don't really have a good space to put it in, and it would be kind of forced anyway. So probably won't ever plan anything in the future, but we're not done with Wildstorm, unfortunately for some of these folks. Luckily, the next time we come back to Wildstorm, it should be more coherent, more fully fleshed out. Ed Moore, Teal Productions, Blustered Puppy, History of Comics on Film, Jarrett Keene, Julia Rowell wrote, "Oh my God, this makes me happy to see some Wildstorm love on your podcast yet again. I've been thinking about Wildcats lately. Justice Trek, Keith G. Baker, Mark D. White, Ms. Thunderbird's Imagination, Monitor Earth Prime, The Never Gets Old Podcast, Nick Spence, Peacebound and Down, Wonder Woman Podcast, Sean Drox, Sim Tutulo, This Cat is RD, Vixen Foxy Robot 17, and yesterday's BS at That Which Flaps in the Night. Martin took me to the docks to borrow a friend's cruiser.
I'm going upwards. I hope going upwards is right. Let's see.
I thought that I was moving stealthily, but apparently not quietly enough for Martin. Part of the problem seemed to be navigating an unfamiliar area in the dark.
So yeah, I'm going backwards and forwards. Where am I?
The docks were also more expansive than either of us expected.
There's no way it's this far down.
I must confess that I was starting to get visibly frustrated.
No, I don't know why I'm having such a problem finding things today, Frank.
But finally we found our ship.
I'm there, I tell you.
Which required a passcode for the security gate.
Let me see here.
Martin had been here before, but didn't exactly have said code.
Oh, give me an hour to find that.
And then I spotted the first MI5 spook.
Oh, dear.
I figured it was time to bring the power baton back into play.
Oh, thanks God. Yeah, please, just use anything you want.
After His Majesty's first agent took a nap, it became a game of whack-a-mole with the Secret Service.
So you can completely kill all that.
I pressed upon the need to speed the code breaking up.
Going down, touch passcode. Right. Okay, moving my little finger up and down. Not in a fun way. I've got it, yes indeed.
With that, we were off, and we planned to set Martin back down at the next nearest dock before I navigated alone to parts as yet unknown.
If anybody wants to hear anything more from me, I've got a blog called Too Dangerous for a Girl, which I always have to explain isn't a sexist title. It's a reference to the Legion of Superheroes and Saturn Girl and the mission on which Brainiac 5 said, you can't go, it's too dangerous for a girl. And of course, I don't agree with that. It's probably a badly chosen title. Anyway, whenever I'm putting plugs onto my tweets, I just say review it too dangerous ... because I'm afraid of the whole thing nowadays. But yeah, if you look at me for Too Dangerous for a Girl, I do weekly comic book reviews, not too many because I tend to spend so much time writing them. You can find me on there, Too Dangerous for a Girl. Follow me at Twitter, Twitter X at Mark Gray. I'm on Blue Sky, which is a nicer place generally, and just look for Mark Gray at Blue Sky, the usual Blue Sky social business. I'm at Facebook, but no one can find any humans on there these days anyway, so why bother? As Frank noted at the top of the programme, I'm on various podcasts, but really, find me at Blue Sky. That's a nice place. Pop across the blog if you fancy comic book reviews. But really, have a nice life, kids.
And by the way, I don't think that you want anybody who can't decipher the inherent irony of Too Dangerous for a Girl commenting or reading there anyway. That's sort of like you're giving yourself a little bit of a moat there. The folks who can't get that, you're not being serious about that, you don't need to talk to those people anyway.
Fair enough, yeah, okay, thank you very much indeed.
What will the topic be next month? Sorry folks, it wouldn't be secret files if I gave them away. You just have to do your part by listening to each episode. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. I've been Frank.
And I've been Martin.
As always, we leave you with a question for the next episode.
Do you want to hear a secret?